Chapter 47-27. The 6 sons were all dispatched. Although each of them had a warm smile on their faces, they were already undercurrent. This is the best time to perform, directly related to their status in the hearts of the Emperor Zhenliang and the elders. In these several battles to win the peach, the prince has already become the existence of arrogant people. Even those elders have already favored it, and it has the meaning of substituting for the little emperor. Therefore, every son-in-law has made great efforts to bring his realm to the top. After all, he can only get more attention when he comes to the end. Just as all Yanxian was ready to go to heaven, a lightly written voice sounded in the heavenly court. Emperor, I will participate in this battle for the peach. Zhen Wuyang wrapped all Yanxian in this heavenly court for a moment, and then all looked at him. The little emperor slowly got up and swept the Yanxian. Yan, are you sure? Zhen Wuyang also got up, a little happy in his eyes. I've never participated in it all the time, so that some people have ignored the existence. This time, I just want them to distinguish between the primary and the secondary. The little emperor's voice was low and prestigious, and he looked at the next one without scruples. Zhong Yanxian. The 6 sons looked at each other in unison, and their faces were completely different. The son did not speak, but the palms in his sleeves were tightly held together. Well, Yenner, I haven't seen your cultivation behavior for a long time. I can take advantage of this opportunity today. Zhen Wuyang smiled and waved his sleeve at the same time. Come here, informed Qin Qing to I rolled in, and asked him to accompany Yenner. No, Emperor, I don't need Qin Qing this time, Xiao Dijuan said here, looking at Jian Wushuang. His eyes met, he said, Brother Jian, can you follow me? All Yanxian's eyes converged on Jian Wushuang's body again. Zhen Wuyang also looked at Jian Wushuang, the emperor's consciousness beyond his imagination, and he could easily see everything he wanted to know. Soon he was a little puzzled. This kid who was just a fairyland, in addition to his amazing talents, seemed to have a unique physique. Even he couldn't see through it. At the same time, he has a feeling that he can't tell why. Although this young man's fairyland is not very deep, it seems inexplicably extremely comfortable, as if there is a certain level of association. Taking back the emperor's consciousness, Zhen Wuyang nodded. Go on, Yenner. For this grand dude, who always dislikes the mountains and dews, and is silent, once the matter is determined, even the emperor is difficult to change. Suddenly, Xiaodijin came to Jian Wushuang and said slightly, Let's go, it seems they shouldn't be able to wait. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate too much. After nodding, he got up and walked outside the heavenly court. The thin purple robe suddenly grabbed Jian Wushuang's arm, and a pair of muddy eyes seemed to want to explain something, and finally only whispered, Little Emperor has given it to you. Xiaodijin stepped forward and patted the shoulder of thin purple robe, then walked out of heaven with Jian Wushuang. Luyan Shuwan, Yanli Vast. Standing outside the court of heaven, all Yanxian scattered down like a panic, and the 6 sons also brought their own companions and fell to heaven. The battle for the peach that involved more than 300 Yanxian in total began. The Emperor Zhenliang, who was sitting in the heavenly court, waved his hand, and the misty scroll made by Yanli was reflected in the hall. The scene in this picture is Huang Heavenly Realm. You guys guess who will win the peach this time? Who will it be? Zhen Wuyang asked. It's the second son. A long-bearded old man Fu Su smiled. Another old man in black robe refuted. The 4 sons are not weak. The 3 sons are the last candidates who can win Xiantao. If the old man is right, he already has a preliminary understanding of the fairy style. Hundreds of elders in the heavenly courts expressed their opinions, but in general, they pointed the candidates to the second son, the third son, and the 4 sons. Zhen Wuyang seems to have other answers. Looking down at the sculpture like Yu Bodeo. Yu Chong, what do you think? Uncle Yu raised his head, and his murky, deep eyes seemed to pass through the flowing clouds, looking towards the heaven. The little guy next to Xiaodijin is extraordinary. So you also think he will win this fairy peach? The little emperor is calm, and will not do things that are not sure. Once he shoots, everything will be a foregone conclusion. After listening to Yu Boss' words, Zhen Wuyang no longer spoke. With the elders, he carefully watched the picture together. Between the vast clouds, the two black-shirt rangers dressed in figures sat in the clouds, seemingly not in a hurry to compete for Xiantao, but they seemed to be traveling. This heaven, which carries the entire heaven, is completely composed of the giant water of Gaochuan, which is quite mysterious and vast. You said, how much assurance can we get to the end? On the empty flowing cloud, Xiaodi Junxing feared that Jian Wushuang could not hear it and shouted. Jian Wushuang heard and said, I don't know, I try my best. So what if my brothers come over again? It's not easy kill it back, but I think in this heavenly court, they should also be able to converge a little bit. At most it's just a little action. No matter what, I will win Xiantao this time. There must be no mistake. So confident. I can feel that your siblings are very resentful to you. Maybe they will come together next time. Why afraid? Xiao Dijuan asked with raised eyebrows. Of course I'm afraid that I'm drawn in for no reason. But I want to live for a few more years. Jian Wushuang lay back in the clouds and laid back. Little Emperor pouted. Which can become Yin Xian, which one does not regard Shou Yuan as nothing? You old monster, who doesn't know how many years have lived. Are you so attached to longevity? Jian Wushuang felt very helpless. It has not been 10 million years since he entered the path of spiritual practice. Now he is actually called an old monster, and he adds some old-fashionedness. Moreover, he couldn't explain it. He was involved too much, and it was extremely likely to cause unnecessary troubles because of the missed words. I am afraid that they, the Yinxian and Dayanhuan, can hardly imagine a Yinxian who is only a few million years old. After arrogantly passing by, under the tug of the little emperor, the two fell into heaven. In the huge roaring water, the two figures drove the waves forward. Yin Xian, who participated in the battle for the peach, passed by, glancing at them, and hurried away. Chapter 47:28. After all, with the exception of the little emperor whose strength was not announced, the remaining 6 sons all had the terrifying fighting power of tying the 3 Yin Xian with one battle. In addition, each son can also carry an old companion with a deep realm, and can basically erase directly when facing the individual Yin Xian. Of course, erasure is not a direct kill, but a teleportation. In this battle for Peach, basically, only the sons are fighting for it. Rao is so. The Yin Xian who can attend the feast of the heavenly court are still rushing towards this. Although Xiantao is impossible to obtain, there are countless great chances in the heaven of this heaven. If you can get even a hint of fairy feeling somewhere, it will be a big transformation. Therefore, apart from a few sons, most of those who participated in the peach robbing rushed to the supremacy. The giant rivers and rivers, standing forever, with grass and mayflies, accumulate in the sun and the moon. Every grass, tree, mountain, and water in this heaven has already had aura of vitality, and shuttled among them. The sublimation of the body is sublimating at a subtle speed. At the same time, there are also fairy spirits built by the way of heaven, which are very unfriendly to these interrupters. Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan were very unlucky. When performing a reed crossing the river in a giant water, the unknown underwater fairy set off a huge wave, and directly lifted the two into the water. Fortunately, the fairy at the bottom of the water is not malicious, but after a little bit of play, it disappears. Damn, it's really unpredictable. Jian Wushuang, who was embarrassed to the shore, fell back on the shore. After the last big voyage, he had some resistance to the water, fearing that he would meet the giant sea sky chapter again in the water, that kind of unknown and scary creature. Little Emperor's performance was not much better than Jian Wushuang's, and he was slightly gasping and helpless. Since the waterway is not easy to go, let's take the mountain road next. It seems that 1 year is enough, but in this vast sky, it is not enough. Jian Wushuang analyzed, and at the same time looked at the Shurye Songlin. The little emperor nodded. According to you. However, just as the two were preparing for the route, a fairy resembling a giant ape, but with a dragon head, quietly protruded a huge head from the green forest in front of it. The turbid breath from the black hole-like nostrils is much stronger than the hurricane. Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan glanced at each other, and both saw a bitterness in the other's eyes. Boom! A palm defeated a Yinxian figure, and at this moment, The sun's eyebrows were full of gloom. Behind him, I do not know when dozens of Yinxian gathered. After a moment, the sun corrected his voice in a low voice. You check in batches one by one. Try to avoid the big conflict with the Yinxian next to the sun, but try not to cause a big conflict. The dozens of Yinxian promised at the same time, and then scattered across the sky in a flash. Ma'am, do you think that the one who won the Xiantiao this time will be the son of Yanzi? A strange smile appeared on Baipao Yangxian's face. The second son laughed. Do you think that there is no strength at all, or can the sick emperor have a climate? The son corrected his eyebrows and twisted it into a Chuan character, and said in a deep voice, My partner, pay attention to your words and deeds. You have a sick tuberculosis. You rot me into the stomach. Otherwise it will be passed into my emperor's ear. I must also be implicated. Follow the second son. Baipao Yinxian bowed his head to admit that he was wrong. This, on the other hand, is by no means your opponent. Young Master Zhang didn't open his mouth. His brows spread slowly. Yeah, if it's not the emperor's protection, this shameful guy should die before he is born. The real blood and luck of the emperor, no matter from the level of life or the perception of the road, are far beyond the top level of the same realm. And even this advantage has become more apparent after entering the realm of Yinxian. But there is a special case among their 7 sons. This special case is the son of Yin. As the eldest son of an emperor, his physique has been declining to the extreme since he was born, almost died, and accompanied by various tuberculosis. It is impossible to practice at all. This is a shame. As the bloodline of the emperor who controlled the avenue and waved to create the heavenly court, he would actually suffer from such an incredible illness. He couldn't figure it out. How could the Emperor Beizhuang have a bloodline suffering from tuberculosis? Even any blind treasure in the heaven realm could not be healed, as if it were some kind of curse, accompanying him until his death. The little emperor suffering from tuberculosis has also become a forbidden Emperor Zhenwiang. No one knows except their 6 sons and their companions. How can a guy who vomits blood violently after strenuous exercise deserve to fight him? There was a sense of pleasure in the eyes of Gongzi Deng, and he secretly said, Since I haven't stopped you from coming to heaven, then this time, in the face of the emperor and their face, you will step on your soles. What is the location of Xiantiao now? Return to the second son. There is a special fluctuation in the direction of Jiaozhou, and the 4 sons and the 5 sons are likely to be there. Go to Jiaozhou, and at the same time release the news. Let Yin Xian along the way, try to get rid of Gongzi Yan. Expensive. A loud roar rang through the wild forest, and the ancient giant tree began to collapse. I saw a huge to the extreme strange ape running in this green forest. The sturdy body easily broke the giant tree in front of them. If you look closely, on the back of this strange ape's vast silver hair, the 2 dressed rangers appear to be lying on their backs contentedly. Jian Wushuang beat a full hiccup, and then gave a thumbs up to the little emperor. Just now a big hill-like fish entered the strange belly of both of them. What Jian Wushuang didn't think of was that this man who was a prince, and had a gloomy face all day long, like someone who owed him 800 yuan, was actually a good fish roast. Just a piece of rock salt, a pile of towering green forest. It simply roasted the beautiful grilled fish. For food, Jian Wushuang has long gone. The reason for the roasted fish is purely when fighting with the apes under the seat. A fish immortal with a wise mind floats up from the bottom of the water, and coincidentally, the sword is a double-inch sword Mang. Sent it to the west heavens impartially. Adhering to the principle of not wasting, Jian Wushuang reluctantly took it out of the water, and prepared to sacrifice to the 5 organs temple. The little emperor took over and baked a delicious grilled fish. Chapter 47-29. Jian Wushuang was helpless, and patted the broad back of his body. Can I say no? Most of this has entered this guy's stomach. No, you can't eat less than this guy. And you should work hard when you win the peach. Xiao Dijuan looked serious. Cannibalism is short. Jian Wushuang said leisurely, agreeing. Then 2 people and 1 beast continued to walk leisurely in the sky. At this moment, among the heavenly courts, all the veterans who were originally watching the pictures of the heavenly realm were all weird. and even the real Wu Yang on the throne was twitching the corner of his mouth. Originally an extremely tense battle for the peach, when the picture changed, when he arrived at the two of them, it turned into a survival path for food exploration. Heavenly Emperor's heavenly tree. So I was given this boy's order. There is some blood in Jin Wuyang's heart, and all the sky trees are all the top raw materials for the creation of heaven. And there is no heaven without the Emperor's luck, and they can't grow at all. And the sky trees growing in the heavenly realm can be regarded as a fish roasted by the little emperor and burned cleanly with a fire. However, when he saw that Xiao Daijin's face was no longer sullen, Zhenwuyang Emperor suppressed the complaint and began to look at this vacation-like leisurely duo with great interest. Little Emperor, is this a broken pot? In the heavenly court, an elder could not help but whisper, I'm not sure, I look like the little emperor. It seems that I don't intend to compete for Xiantao. In the opinion of the old man, it is a wise move for the little emperor to show his demeanor as a brother, and let his brother be modest. If you talk more, you will be punished in this seat to go to heaven realm, to take care of Tian Chumu. Heaven is still. Sitting on the back of the strange ape, Jian Wushuang looked at the chain iron plate on the neck of the strange ape, looking a little weird. What is your chain iron plate? Even Yin Xian can be imprisoned. The little emperor nodded. Yes, unless all steps can be taken in full. Otherwise all Yin Xian can't escape my control. Jian Wushuang heard the words and felt awkward for a while, thinking that if it was not the reason for the imprisoned chain, how could he possibly be a prisoner for several days? Seemingly seeing where his heart was, the little emperor said again, This is a treasure in my emperor's hand, named Tian Tian Sua. When I took over the sixth heaven realm, the emperor paid me, and at the beginning it's not me who traps you. It's the little ones who do and open their eyes. Jian Wushuang didn't pay much attention to the original things. After all, he only became a prisoner in less than a day, and he directly wiped out a Yin Xian, and did not suffer a big loss. It just made him a little curious as to where he was caught. Before the sword, Wushuang opened his mouth to prepare for an inquiry. An indescribable life and death crisis burst out of his consciousness. He didn't want to think about it. He released his strength directly and slapped the giant ape's big head. Strange ape heart grasps the understanding. The huge body suddenly a face break, and then lie prone on the ground. A total of more than 10 magnificent and powerful forces swept from all directions, almost wiped the heads of Jian Wushuang and Xiao Dijuan. The gigantic giant forest cut off a large area, and the power of terror exploded. Standing in the air, Jian Wushuang and Xiaodijin looked cold. If I hit the head just now, I am afraid that I will be seriously injured on the spot. Immediately afterwards, 11 powerful Yinxian figures appeared, all looking at him strangely. A group of miscellaneous things, dare to injure this seat in this heaven? Xiao Dijuan looked clouded, and his eyes were as thick as water. If he was not just Jian Wushuang, he would be hit hard even if he was not out of the game. As the first Yin Xian, it was the support knot that put the Ju Ci outside the Tianmen at the time. At this moment, he held a floating dust, and a pair of immortals made the pie. He didn't care about Xiaodijin's insults, but instead smiled. How much Xiaodijin offends is really a last resort. I hope that Xiaodijin can voluntarily withdraw and save the next big move. The little emperor looked awkwardly. Is the sun sending you? Fujia didn't open his mouth, but flicked the dust and said softly, Please quit this little emperor to avoid the next big move. Miscellaneous things find death. He shouted in rage. Facing the 11 Yinxian instead of flinching, he directly confronted. A slender soft sword stirred the wind and the clouds, carrying the supreme power covered to press against the knot. Fu Jie's eyes flashed inconceivably, and then he smiled coldly, dusting the sky with his hands. You guys do it. The dust blows up to 1,000,000 feet in the wind, and there is a lingering posture carrying away. At the same time, the other 10 Yinxian also left, and all the magnificent Yinxian bombarded the little emperor. Strive to get it out of the battle. But at the next moment, a blade of sharp sword was caught in the wind, like a torn scarf, and suddenly cut forward. The dust that was about to cover up the sky was directly cut into 2 pieces under this quietly rising sword. And the little emperor also broke from there. Stab a sword straight. Life and death terror surged into my heart, and the knot was almost a subconscious head, only to escape the unmatched sword. A drop of Yin Hongxian blood rolled off the slender cut between the necks and soaked the shoulder robe. Wuxia recovered from the shock and looked at Xiaodaijian's eyes full of hatred. "Don't keep your hands, attack with all your strength," he shouted, and immediately manipulated the dust that had been cut off an inch in his hand and ran away. The little emperor stood in its place without any fear, and a dark field centered on him, spreading quietly like vines to the surroundings. And the support not blinded by hatred, wherever he noticed the subtle changes in the air around him, he had to hit him with 5 fingers. But the surrounding air seemed to be muddy, and he felt that the release of the force in his body was slow. With the same feeling, there are other Yinxian. The time seems to be extended for a long time, but Wuxia only feels that he has been gliding in the air for a long time, but has not yet landed. The emperor's incomprehensible face gradually enlarged, and at the same time a figure with a broken sword slowly emerged, and the cold eyes were almost the same. "No, why are there 2 little emperors?" What responded to him was a sword that was almost terrifying. A colorful sword. Each sword reflects colorful huamang in the air. Xianhe hongying one after another, carrying infinite killing intention, all cut to the support knot. The Yinxian body burst open in an instant. Chapter 47:30. As if the heart was beating vigorously, Fuji's terrified voice resounded from the fairy source. "Little Emperor, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. I will never target you anymore, let me go. I will voluntarily quit." The little emperor looked calm. "Tell me, who asked you to kill me?" Fuji Xianyuan seemed to be struggling for a while, and finally struggled. "Yes, it is the second son." After hearing this answer, he was not surprised. There wasn't even a slight wave in his eyes. "Little Emperor, this is in heaven, you can't." Before even saying a word, the little emperor directly crushed his fairy source. In the heavenly realm, behead a Yinxian. Yinxian, who was seeing this scene all around, was shocked. They did not expect that Xiaodaijian would dare to kill him. This is one of the ceremonies that the emperor once set up in the heaven realm that has heavenly court. One of them is that heavenly court cannot be stained with blood. But right now, the little emperor actually wiped out a Yinxian in this heaven. They all took a step back and panicked in their eyes. Once something starts, it is doomed to look back. When the sword with the broken sword was unparalleled, and the unscrupulous sword chopped off Yinxian, the remaining 9 Yinxian, the only remaining fighting intention in the heart, were replaced by fear. Then all fled without flesh. But how can they easily leave? Adhering to the concept of cutting grass and eradicating roots, Jian Wushuang directly released the sword spirit of Xinghe Lake and the sea, a majestic star style, cut down. The most common one is straight, but it seems to have swept the millions of miles around the space, and with the general trend of stars, the every inch of space pointed by Jianfeng is suppressed. At the same time, countless sword-shaped condensed tongshanmangs rose from the ground and swept up. This is an explosive sword. Even if Yinxian is under this style, he can only drink hatred. 3 Yinxian were unable to dodge, and were devoured and destroyed on the spot, and no trace of the fairy source remained. The little emperor also moves forward, like a ghost. Every time he strikes, he directly wipes out a source of a mortal fairy. In this moment, 6 Yinxian have been destroyed. Their speed was so fast that the emperor sitting in the heavenly court and the elders were too late to shoot, and there were only 2 Yinxian left in the encirclement. Finally, when Jian Wushuang's blade was about to be cut, the 2 Yinxian under that blade quietly disappeared. Buzz! The space was rippling, and the 2 almost immortal Yinxian fell straight into the heavenly palace. Jian Wushuang couldn't hold back, and the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand almost flew himself out. The little emperor raised his head, and Sun Lung looked at the location of the heavenly court. "Yongziyan, do you know that you have violated the law?" A voice with irrepressible anger resounded in the heavens, the voice of the Emperor Zhenwiang. "Yongziyan doesn't know which sky rule was violated, please also express." Xiao Dijun was not afraid, coldly said, "Heaven cannot be stained with blood, but you are in Tianting. and you can kill Yin Xian directly, and you still refuse to confess your sins." The little emperor heard the words and smiled coldly. "It's good for me to kill Yin Xian, but it's not the heaven, but the heaven. Where do I start breaking the rules?" Heaven was dead, and at the end, a suffocating anger came from the direction of heaven, and everything was calm again. "Fuck things." A palm shot towards the front of the case. The lips of Zenwiang Emperor's lips tremble slightly. All the elders didn't say a word. The scene in the world just now was all taken into view. The two's expressions are too shocking. Especially the young man with the broken sword, in the area of Yin Xian, easily kills Yin Xian in the same realm. And it seems that it is not laborious. Chapter 47:31. In this vast expanse of heaven, almost at the same time that the sky-high pillar was ascended, nearly 100 bodies carried the general trend and swept away from the wild and the wild. Congratulations to the 4 sons who won Xiantao. Amidst the misty mountains and rivers, a handsome young man dressed in white clothes, and standing on the top of the mountain, holds a fairy peach in the color of glass in his hand. Behind him stood nearly 20 powerful Yin Xian, and this handsome young man is the 4th brother of Gongzi Yen, also known as Gongzi Qian. Xiantao exudes a faint breath without interruption. With his 5 senses intuition, he almost rushed to Jiaozhou, the most central part of the heaven realm, to cut the Shenshan mountain and obtain Xiantao. A smug look rose from the bottom of his eyes, which was also the first time he got Xiantao. In the previous battles for winning the peach, it was not him, but the son who corrected the leader. But this time, I am afraid the winner has changed. Those who can win Xiantao the first time have almost laid the ground, and even only need to hide it in the next time. Except for the premeditated containment, it would not be too easy to spend 7 days. However, Gongzi Qian did not think that he had won the victory. Each of his brothers is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Both strength and appeal are extremely strong. It's almost 20 days now. Except for the big brother who has almost no threats. I am afraid that the Yin Xian who have participated in this battle for the peach will probably have split into several camps. Thinking of this, Gongzi Qian stretched out his hand to draw a breath from Xiantao and gave it to a Yin Xian beside him. "Bring this breath, you will leave here, how far you go, and at the same time look for Gongzi Yen along the way. Try to make him the target." The middle-aged Yin Xian heart grasped the magical power, and used a little magical power to transform the breath in his hand into the appearance of Xiantao. "4 sons, rest assured, let us do the rest." Gong Ziqian nodded with satisfaction. More than 20 Yin Xian behind him were divided into 2 teams. One team followed him, the other team escorted the fake Xiantao away. Immortal Cloud is vast, he did not stay at all, carrying 12 Yin Xian ready to leave. At this moment, a sense of crisis of great terror suddenly surged from behind. "Father, what are you going to do in such a hurry?" It was a little thin, with a shadowy figure in his eyes slowly coming out of the Zonglin, and he was alone. But only such a figure appeared, but it made all Yin Xian like enemy. Gong Ziqian's pupil shrank suddenly, as if he saw the most unwilling to face. In this battle for the peach, in addition to the son's correction, there are 2 people who make him most afraid. One is Gong Ziyu, and the other is the figure at the moment. There is no reason for him, and there are rumors that the 2 of them have realized their respective fairy styles. Once you realize the fairy style, even if there is only a trace, it means that you have taken that step, and only waiting for the opportunity to arrive, you can completely go to the next level. Originally thinking that at least 2 or 3 days later, they would find that they had chased one of the toughest guys without thinking for a long time. Gongzi Qian smiled stiffly. "It turns out to be the 5th brother. Why, did you detect the breath of Xiantao? Where?" The solitary son Emo apparently did not want to speak more, reaching for his finger directly, and his voice was low. "4th brother, hand Xiantao to me. I will let you leave, and it is better to be expelled on the spot." There was a touch of disgust in Gong Ziqian's eyes. "It's up to you? Do you know how many Yin Xian are stuck around you? I advise you how far you can roll, and I will save myself later." It seems that there is no negotiation. Young Master Emo spread his hand, with a sneer in his eyes. "Do it." With Gong Ziqian's anger, All Yanxian all left, and the majestic Yanli turned into a dense net and turned down towards the sun's ink pocket. Mob. Taking the sun ink as the center, the dark blue crystals were suddenly refracted throughout the air, just like the ripples on the lake, and began to move regularly. At the same time, young Master Mo's palm strokes a long whip, which is 100 feet long, and is formed by the condensation of dark blue crystals, and falls from the ripples. A faint burst of detachment suddenly burst into the sky. The long whip stopped, and the unimaginable potential energy was rippled and scattered. For those who approached almost in a face, the body of the shattered, and then the white light flashed away from the heaven. Young Master Mo held this crystal long whip, and the whole body seemed to be surging with location and terrible energy. Every time the long whip was thrown, it was able to directly defeat a Yanxian. Each of them belongs to the Yanxian, who exist in the top of the heaven, but they are difficult to resist even the hit of the sun. But it was tens of hours, 12 Yanxian, all under the attack of Gongzi Mo, all out. A stream of cold sweat flowed out from Gongzi Qian's temples, and it all happened so quickly that he was too late when he had the idea of escape. Gongzi Mo's companion came out of the darkness at this time and blocked his way. "Father, let Xiantao hand in. I will let you two leave." The young son Mo said softly. The crystalline long whip in his hand was like a dragon, entrenched behind him, and the situation was magnificent. "4 sons, give it to him, leaving Qingshan without worrying about firewood." Gongzi Qian's companion whispered. He gritted his teeth without saying a word. If Xiantao was handed over, it was almost declared to be out of disguise. In the later period, the peach contenders would only be able to choose from the 3 of Gongzi Jiao, Gongzi Yu and Gongzi Mo. After a moment, Master Z decided to grind his teeth, and threw the fairy peach in his arms to Master Z. Looking at the precious light flowing in the hand, the fairy peach with the rainbow shadows, the youngster Mo smiled secretly, and then put it in his arms. "Large companion, let's go." Young Master Qian didn't mean to stay at all, and his feet suddenly lifted up, but the next moment, the crystal long whip that was entrenched in the air shot up, and pulled directly Gongzi Qian, with his companion. Before they even made a sound, they disappeared completely. Everything seemed as if nothing had happened. The silence was at its extreme. At this broken mountain top, only 2 figures were left at the moment. The corners of Gongzi Mo's mouth were traced with a smile, and his figure disappeared. Everything is silent again. And not far from this broken mountain top, under a huge cliff, a strange ape was curling in between, and the 2 wheels were full of tension in their big eyes. They all have concerns, such as the birth of Xiantao and Jiaozhou, the center of the world, and the rest of the emperor and Yin Xian are also coming gradually. If the 2 defeats at this moment are both injured, they will be extremely passive in the next competition. With a wave of his sleeves, the son looked at Xiao Dijuan coldly, and then turned away. The entire Jiaozhou seemed to be quiet again. "It's not too late. We have to leave to find Gongzi Mo quickly." Xiao Dijuan turned to look at Jian Wushuang. He nodded and looked around for a week, when he found no hidden ambush. He waved and picked up the strange ape, who was still lying on the edge of the cliff. "Let's expose it again next time. Be careful to put you on the fire and bake it." After slamming the big guy's head hard, Jian Wushuang didn't have a good air. The strange ape heard the words and hurriedly shook his huge head, looking at him kindly. Regarding this strange ape, when he was rushing to Jiaozhou, the 2 of them were ready to put it back, but accidentally discovered that it had a keen sense of Xiantao's breath and great crisis, and naturally continued to carry this big burden. Sitting on the back of the strange ape again, the 2 followed the route where the sun Mo disappeared and pursued it. "Brother, long time no see." As we traveled through the mountains and forests for a long time, one did not know where to start, and an abrupt voice resounded in my ears. Jian Wushuang's heart was fixed, and he looked subconsciously to his side. I saw the handsome young man who had left before. At this moment, he didn't know where he got out of it, and he looked at Xiaotajin and grinned. A slender soft sword was pulled out suddenly, straight forward, and he would pierce his neck by an inch. The Junlang youth hurriedly retreated, giving way to a safe distance. How far away dare to step forward and die? Xiao Dijuan glanced coldly at him, riding lightly. He smiled awkwardly. In fact, brother, I am not malicious to you. I just want to tell you, it is best not to compete with the second brother for their fairy peach. Their strength and state are only a line away from the elders. I am afraid of you. The little emperor looked at him sharply and looked at him. If you talk more, I will cut your tongue now. Junling Youth helpless had to leave with his partner. As he was about to leave, he suddenly turned back and said, Come on, brother. No matter what, I will try my best to help you when I win the peach. After saying this sentence, the figure of the handsome young man disappeared without a trace. The little emperor looked like he didn't hear, and looked forward calm and abnormal. This little brother is not bad, but also yours? Jian Wushuang turned around and asked. 7 sons, the sun is coming. The little emperor seemed unwilling to mention the identities of the various emperors, and after expressing his identity, he remained silent. Jian Wushuang did not have much interest in knowing this. Chapter 4733. Judging from the previous performances of Master ZMO, I am afraid that Jian Wushuang will not have much assurance to win. Coupled with the sun and other remaining emperors, they want to seize Xiantao from them and keep them for 7 days, which is far more difficult than imagined. By mistakenly hitting and catching a strange ape that is extremely sensitive to the breath of Xiantao, this saves the sword Wushuang 2 people a lot of time. They only need to sit on the back of the strange ape to get close to the target. In the following journey, Jian Wushuang and Zai Adajan sent away more than 20 Yinxian outs. With the previous warning from the Emperor Zhenmiang, he and the two had a little restraint, and they no longer focused on killing. Anyone who did not actively provoke provokers was too lazy to stop. At the same time, the young man Mo, who had Xiantao hidden, was about to step out of Jiaozhou, and a crisis of carrying the general situation came. Before seeing nearly 30 Yinxian encircled, a young man with the same heroic appearance as his son also followed. This time, it was the turn of the pupils ink pupils, and the pupil Yu Ziyu. If Jian Wushuang is here, he can surely find that this young man called Gong Ziyu is the guy who was beaten by the little emperor in the heavenly court that day. 5 brother, don't come unharmed. Young Master Yu pulled the corner of his mouth and said with a smile. Gong Ziemo did not answer. After taking a deep breath, he prepared to leave with his companion. Since the 5th brother is going so anxiously, leave Xiantao and go. Young Master Yu slowly stretched out his palm. His face changed slightly, and then he gritted his teeth. Xiantao gives you, let me go. Naturally I can do it. Then a slap-sized package was thrown directly by the Sun and Chick towards the Sun and Feather. There was an eager flash in Gongzi's eyes, and he stretched out his hand to catch the package, but then he frowned. In the same moment, Gongziemo suddenly burst into unmatched strength and went straight to the sky to plunder. Knowing that he was fooled, the Sun Ziyu directly crushed the parcel wrapped with stones in his hand. All for me. He far underestimated the terrible energy of more than 30 Yinxian, and also overestimated himself. It's almost 100 miles to escape, and all the retreat around the body is cut off. Countless majestic forces are connected to each other, which can be revealed. Even if he realizes the foundation of the fairy style, it will not help. Dark blue crystals began to appear in the air, and at the same time a long whip like a dragon fell in the hands of Sun Mo. He was still not ready to compromise, and was struggling with the final. Young Master Mo, is your brain kicked by a donkey? Don't forget everything we have done. Now you are going to look back at me for a fairy peach? The young man's eyes were murky, and he growled angrily. Master Mosi was unimpressed. I will give Xiantao to you, and I will definitely be out of the game. So do you think I will give it to you directly? If you want, just come and get it yourself. There was a touch of disgust in Gong Ziyu's eyes. His right hand was directly grasped in the void, and a long sharp sword came to the fore. In the face of Gong Ziyu, Gong Ziemo didn't have a half chance. By virtue of his own understanding of a trace of immortality, he can expel Gong Ziqian out of the game. It is conceivable that the male Ziyu who has been immersed in the fairy style for a long time will be a blow to him. Rao is so, he did not intend to give up Xiantao Arch. As long as 100 feet, The long whip like a dragon is the first to launch an offensive, enough to tear the whip blade of any situation, leaving a faint white mark in the heavens, and smashing towards the male Ziyu. Without the unfavorable whip, he encountered a hard stubble for the first time. A sword mountain is the head, and the male Ziyu directly used the almost complete fairy style, and attacked it. At the moment, the space around them seems to reflect a diamond-shaped colorful Chinese mangosteen, which directly engulfed and resolved the swift and fierce offensive. At the same time, a thorny needle-like thorn emerged from each diamond-shaped huamang, with hundreds of millions of strands. This sturdy Mengyi came down with Jianshan's heavy cover, and easily sat off the long whip of the sun's ink, strangling his breath. Huamang flashed, and he disappeared with his companion, and he was out. A fairy style containing unique and hegemonic energy is used. When the ink of the sun is easily erased, the son of Yuzi is also stressed. He panted slightly, reached out to grab the fairy peach that fell to the ground, and was ready to leave without stopping for a moment. At this time, the abrupt but familiar opening speech sounded from the ears, making the heart of Gong Ziyu sink heavily. "Third brother, don't come unharmed." The younger son drifted from the dark, with a bit of teasing in his eyes. Gong Ziyu looked at him. "You kept up with it earlier, right? Have you been hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity?" "Yes, I did come before you, but you are too anxious, so I will let you perform more. Now it's time for me to harvest." The younger corrected his smile, and stretched out his palm as he had done before. "Do it." How could Gong Ziyu wait for his death? And with a direct order, more than 30 Yanxian moved, and directly welcomed the more than 10 Yanxian brought by Gongzi. Since the beginning of the battle for Peach, the most fierce battle has begun. At the first time when the scene was chaotic, Gong Ziyu was pregnant with Xiantao, ready to escape. It's just that the next scene made his mood fall to the bottom. "Young Master Hua." "Young Master," Yu gritted his teeth. "Do you want to blend in too?" The noble figure of the Prince Hua is called, and his brows are light. Gong Ziyu heard the words and sneered. "Yongzi Hua, even if Xiantao falls into your hands, do you think you can have it for yourself? Do you think that Gongzi will let you go?" Gongzi Hua shrugged. "I can't control that much. Now when it's urgent, remove Xiantao from your hands and piggyback you out." With his voice falling down, there are also more than 20 Yanxian appeared, joined the battle. A veil of celestial power followed. The sun's wrist shook, and his sharp sword was directly torn. Regarding the enclosing Prince Hua, Prince Yu is not afraid. He has mastered a fairy style. In addition to the impenetrable second elder son, he can stand proudly among the 7 disciples. He is worried that once he enters the melee, his advantage will be completely lost, and it is likely that he will miss Xiantao again. Therefore, dogfight is the most unwilling situation that Gong Ziyu sees, full of too much uncertainty. Chapter 47-34. Huang's general situation burst out from his body, and he even squeezed a gap from the battle situation. Looking at the two sons who were encircled by dozens of Yanxian, Gongha and Gonghua, Gong Ziyu smiled triumphantly, then stepped on the rock and walked away. "Want to go?" The young man corrected his eyes in cold eyes, and stretched out his hand to grasp it from a distance, and suddenly a great force twisted the air, blocking the way of the young man Yu. Almost at the same time, the young son Hua broke out, and the big companion around him blocked the attack of the 10-digit Yanxian, and sent it out. Yanli turned into a sharp cone shape, and ran straight to the back of the young man's feather to stab it. If he hits so hard, he will definitely be hit hard. But just at the moment, Gong Ziyu's figure was dimmed for a moment, and the arrow-like force passed through his back, but he didn't hurt him. Gong Ziyu looked back secretly, and then a pair of huge crystal wings were spawned from behind, flying into the sky. "Go away!" The young man drank his anger, and shoved his palms suddenly, and a red figure swept across the mountain. All Yanxian only felt the darkness in front of him, and those who were at the center of this crimson drawing were hit the spot. The top of the mountain is empty, and the sun is standing at the center of the densely scrolled picture, and the strength of the whole body has been transformed into a crystal dark red. The only remaining son, Hua, and more than a dozen Yinxian all looked at Gongzi correction with an ugly look. Watching Gongzi Yu walking away with Xiantao, Gongzi Jiao transferred all his inner anger to Gongzi Hua's head. Seeing the undisguised murder in the eyes of the son slowly retreated. "No, brother, you better think clearly without me." He hadn't finished his words yet, and the son did not hesitate to cover the force of coming down, directly breaking his divine body and letting him out. At this point, in the battle for the peach, 3 emperors have been eliminated. The only remaining little emperor is still at the edge of the paddling stage, and the young man disappears out of thin air. And the one who really threatens the young man is only the young man. It is also understood that a fairy style, the male Ziyu is about to take that step completely. He never wants to see the male Ziyu become stronger than him. Taking Xiantao is the first step. In order to save unnecessary troubles, all the Yinxian of the other emperor camps were removed. Jiaozhou has a powerful terrain, and is the pinnacle of the heavenly realm, but there is another giant mountain of Xianshan, which is about 100 million feet high, and the pinnacle is adjacent to the heaven. Right now, a figure carrying dark blue wings, breaking through the layers of flowing clouds transformed by the rich vigorous force, went straight to the giant river of the fairy mountain. Now it is the 2nd day of holding the fairy peach, and there are 5 days before the 7-day limit. The male Ziyu only needs to maintain such a high-speed soaring, and it is very likely to become the last peach taker. At that time, as long as he enters the Xianshan giant river to hide, even if the sun insists on finding himself, time is running out. Thinking of this, he smiled triumphantly. His figure accelerated to climb in the mountains. In order to avoid exposure, the Sun Ziyu went forward alone, and he didn't even bring his close companion with him. What he did was try his best to hide himself from the clouds. Feeling the warm breath from his arms, Gongzi finally failed to resist the temptation and took Xiantao in his hands again. There seems to be shackles of numerology, and the most extreme force is surging and tempting. If you don't know that Xiantao has a layer of prohibition on it, I'm afraid the sun will swallow it on the spot. The more he looked, the more he coveted, and the head of Master Zhu gradually became hot. He had been trapped in Yinxian realm for too long, and he had long forgotten his meaning. 5 days is just a flash, but the variables that can occur are too large. If you miss this time, you have to wait another year. He must never wait any longer. He can feel that the sun is correcting something quietly brewing. If he fails to ascend, he will be greeted by a storm in the future. Thinking about it, Gongzi's already hesitant gaze became firmer. He looked up at the immortal mountain Shenfeng, which was nearly adjacent to the heavenly court, and reached billions of feet. At the next moment, Xiantao was reinserted into his arms, and then his arms condensed vast expanse of strength. Like a long whale sucking water, the rich dynamism in the whole heaven rushed towards him. The magnificent shadows began to be reflected in each space. A power that transcended Yinxian diffused, while the strands of black hair turned into white hair. This should not belong to the power of Gongziyu, but he was driven out by him. The only possibility is overdraft. His future in the overwhelming state of overdraft. But at the moment Gongzi's eyes were only crazy. Only the power beyond Yinxian can shake that fairy mountain peak. The next moment, the Sun Yu started. He looked like an ancient deity. Every step was shocking. The soles of the feet easily torn the mountains and rivers. And breathing was vigorous. Then he reached the billions of feet high, enough to adjoin the heavenly mountain fairy mountain, actually intending to pull it off. Infinite strength, destroying Shenfeng with his body. The whole celestial realm began to oscillate, and the gullied the earth. Tianhe rushed back and forth, countless fairy wail. A collapsing sound rumbled through the earth's center, and numerous fine cracks sprawled from the roots of the mountain. This immense mountain fairy peak actually collapsed. The Prince Yu, who was transformed into a huge treasure phase, was full of madness at this moment. With his shoulders against the belly of the mountain, he tried his best to pull out the fairy mountain. What is this kid doing? Sitting on the heavenly throne, Zhen Weiyang's eyebrows were tightened. Is it possible that there is no place for strength? The rest of the elders were shocked and puzzled to see this scene. They could not imagine why Gongziyu did so, and could only wait and see. It's like wrestling. The Sun Yu embraces this fairy mountain and struggles hard. The feedback from the Earth's core breaks, indicating that the interior of Xianshan is beginning to crack. Novel. Calm suddenly broken. The innumerable boulders dropped and caused a series of disasters, and the earth was hollowed out of the deep abyss. The unimaginable weight and height make Yanxian desperate enough. But so far, he was pulled off by the sun. Even Zhen Wuyang was a little surprised. Chapter 4735. Since they cannot use their own power to destroy the prohibition on Xiantao, what if they use the power of the emperor to destroy the embargo imposed by the emperor? And this fairy mountain Shenfeng is the foundation of heaven created by the emperor Zhenming long ago. Gong Ziyu is to use the power of the emperor to destroy the ban on Xiantao. Embracing immortal mountain Shenfeng with one hand, he shook his hand and took out the fairy peach in his arms, and then threw it into the mountain root like an abyss. At that time, you only need to smash this fairy mountain peak, and you will be able to smash it. But at the same time, a strange ape croaked through the world, and I saw in the destroyed mountains and rivers that 1,000 giant apes flexibly traversed in the meantime. It fell into the hands of the strange ape. Good job. At this moment, even the shadowy little emperor couldn't help but lift his mouth. The Sun Yu surrounded by the fairy peak of Xianshan Mountain looked very real. When he saw that the strange ape had intercepted Xiantao from the air, he was furious. Beast dare. The strange ape raised his head with an anthropomorphic grin, then twisted his huge figure, and disappeared into the broken mountains and rivers. Gong Ziyu was furious, embracing the immense mountain of Xianshan Mountain, and threw it wildly at the place where the great ape was. This was a catastrophic moment, and the entire heaven and earth could not bear it, and began to collapse. Sword Wushuang, who was sitting on the back of the giant ape, looked up at the shadow that covered the sky, and suddenly pulled out the Tailuo Excalibur from his waist, and poked directly on the of the strange ape. The strange ape crowed in pain, and ran out with a speed that was almost extreme, millions of miles in a flash. Xianshan Shenfeng, which smashed to the sky and smashed to the ground, could not bear the great force, and broke from the mountain's belly. Gong Ziyu seemed to be completely crazy, and his palms swept out of the supreme force, all strangled in the direction of Jian Wushuang. The atmosphere of the heavens has been disturbed, and the shock wave generated by the Xianshan Shenfeng smashing the ground, even Yanxian cannot stand. Almost when the young Sun Yu was pulling the fairy mountain, the younger son hurried away, and the extremely powerful body also surrounded from the wild. However, after such an intensive offensive stopped for a while, both of them were dressed in black rangers, slowly emerged from the mountains, and climbed into the sky. Gongzi's big mouth breathing, overdrawing the realm of the future, has already caused irreversible damage to him, and only Xiantao can make up for it. Return Xiantao to me soon. Mouthless breathing, Gongziyu looked at Xiao Diju in hate. Holding that Wamang's circulating fairy peach, Xiaotajin smiled sullenly. Want? Are you qualified to fetch it now? Come to me, you waste. Gong Ziyu growled angrily, and the constant loss of the realm inside made him afraid. Upon hearing the word waste, Xiao Daijin's cold face suddenly sank, and a slender soft sword quietly condensed in his hand. At the next moment, he threw Xiantao directly to Jian Wushuang, standing alone and moving forward. The vast swordsmanship surged into a unique sword that pierced the male plume. The Prince Yu, who is in a rage, is not afraid, and his palms are united, as if the strength of Yuan is like a prison. The collision between the two directly wiped out the sword of the little emperor. At the same time, young Master Yu already had a murderous intention in his heart, and he began to reflect the colorful intention in the sky behind him. On one side, the treasure phase that can cause the alienation of the heavens is condensed out, and then facing the little emperor, the giant palm covering the sky falls and sinks. This is a fairy style. It is a fairy style that can be controlled beyond the realm of Yanxian. In the current environment once used, it means that the endless situation will begin. I want you to die the humblest waste. It seems to vent all the negative evil thoughts suppressed in the bottom of my heart. Gongzi's all-in-one style is rushed to be killed. As long as the little emperor can't escape, only Xian Yuan can break this road. But the little emperor stood on the spot. His eyes were calm and calm. Young Master Yin, hurry away. In the distance, Jian Wushuang's voice sounded. The little emperor slowly raised the corner of his mouth, facing the magnificent power, and raised a thin arm. I have never wanted to be any of your elder brothers, and naturally I will not perform the corresponding duties. Today, if you want to kill me, I will naturally return it in the same way. The indifferent to almost indifferent voice resounded, and there was no emotional fluctuation in his eyes from beginning to end. The long hair broke through the girdle and fluttered in the air. A breath of silence, nothingness, the mixture of black and white diffused, as in the same round without any warm big day slowly rising. Gong Ziya's crazy eyes were clear, revealing incredible eyes. That kind of breath is fairy style. No, it's impossible. How can this kind of guy who can't even comprehend the cultivation of spiritual practice realize the fairy style? The giant palm of the sky collided with the dead day of Hayo in white, which inspired the most terrible martyrdom. It has surpassed the power of Yinxian realm, and instantly cleared all visible objects. The heavens and the earth are collapsing, the mountains and rivers are all destroyed. Ji Dai made every Yinxian cover his eyes subconsciously. Jian Wushuang was also a little shocked. He knew something about Xiaodajin himself. The little emperor seems to suffer from a certain hidden disease, whether it is the state of the realm, or the state of the divine body, which can only compete with the ordinary Yinxian. But now, with his weak body, he released such a terrible form, which shocked Jian Wushuang. And at the same time he was puzzled. Did Xiao Dijuan keep concealing the situation before? Now is his real strength? When the polar day dissipated, the two figures were still standing on the sky dome. At the moment, the son of the sun was extremely embarrassed, from the undulating chest to the gray hair, which all told him that he was the end of the crossbow. Previously, Li Ba Xianshan had overdrawn his realm and released a fairy-style crazy, almost exhausting his dynamism to the extreme. It's the little emperor. Except for a look of infrared, he didn't get hurt. Looking at the little emperor who walked towards him step by step, Gong Ziyu unconsciously stepped back. I said, if you make a killing first, then I will return it in the same way. A thick and condensed murderous opportunity emerged from the eyes of the little emperor. Chapter 47-36. Today's Gong Ziyu has no possibility of escaping. If this hit is hit, he will not even be able to get out of the game. Emperor, save me. Fighting the last trace of strength, Gong Ziyu's panic-stricken voice resounded throughout the heavens. Zhen Wuyang sitting on top of the heavenly court can't calm down. No one knows the character of Xiaodajin better than him. That is a guy who is lawless and has no fear. If he moved his heart, there was almost no room for maneuver. Just as Zhen Wuyang was about to lower the true shadow, the heavens oscillated. Each of the giant awns that blended in the horrible killing intention, while stabbing at the male feather, seemed to be blocked by a transparent barrier, and it was hard to score a half. At the same time, a light red raging force surged up, smashing every giant onto death. Little Emperor's face froze, and the soft sword in his hand began to tremble. With the light red coming from strength, it is the sun of correction. He stood in front of Gong Ziyu for a moment, and looked at Xiao Emperor with a complicated look. Yes, it's you. For the rest of his life, Gong Ziyu even said something unfavorable. He didn't squint, and the sun stared tightly at the little emperor. Yong Ziyan, I do know how you realize the fairy style, but if you want to win the fairy peach by relying only on a fairy style, advise don't bother. With the sound of his words, nearly 30 Yinxian rushed from Sai, and showed a trend of encirclement, surrounding Xiaodajin and Jian Wushuang in the center. Yong Ziyan, hand over Xiantao, and now quit automatically. I will spare you a life. Young master said softly. Want Xiantao? It's up to you. Xiao Dijuan smiled disdainfully. I don't know why. Whenever faced with the little emperor, the anger in the inner heart of the younger son could not be restrained. Even a sentence can make him angry. Intercepted on the spot. The son sighed with exclamation. The more than 30 Yin Xian immediately set off, the most extinct Yin Xian interlinked, facing the duo under the pressure. Sword Wushuang moved, releasing the force without reservation. At the same time, the ancestral technique, the realm of heaven, the realm of heaven, with the blessing of the Yinxian realm, the Tianmen Gate, which is the power of the ancestral art, has been completely transformed. Under the guidance of one side, the dense web condensed by the force of 30 Yinxian could not be pressed down for a while, showing a glued state. The little emperor raised the soft sword, and the sword was in full swing. Together, the two broke through the attack of Yinxian. The young man who was far away from the battle circle corrected, and there was a look of surprise in his eyes, and his gaze towards Jian Wushuang began to become vigilant. The move released by Jian Wushuang just now made the young man feel a little deterred. Fight against him, how much do you have the chance to win? He held out his finger and pointed to the sword fighting Wushuang who was fighting. The white robe beside him gazed, and then dimmed again, less than 30%. Is it? Young master slowly raised his mouth. No wonder young master Yin didn't even bring Qingqing. There was a deeper unpredictable guy around him. Son, let me go, I will bring Xiantao back. Bai Pao Yinxian asked. The young man shook his head and turned to look at the young Manyu. With a tight heart, Gongziyu stepped back half a step, and his eyes were alert and disturbed. Now that he is in a situation where the son wants to get him out, it is just a wave of effort. Help me do one thing. It's your reward for my life-saving grace. Gongzi said suddenly a palm of his heart. Immediately, a light red diffusive force poured into the limbs and corpses of the male son, and the meridian that had dried him up was filled again. Gongzi's condition recovered at a rate visible to the naked eye. Remember, what you did to you just now, you just give it back. I'll wait for your good news. The younger patted his shoulder, and then slowly backed up with his partner. How can Gongziyu not know what kind of abacus he is playing? But if he doesn't correct him, he will have fallen a long time ago. And where can he go back? Even without the reminder of the son's correction, he would revenge and return all the great horror between life and death. Returning to the pinnacle, Gongziyu felt the irresistible vigor in his body, and then stepped out in one step, magnifying the power of terror, as if the waves swept forward. A sword flies to a Yinxian, and Jinwu looks at the giant waves coming from the sky. At the next moment, the little emperor came to him quietly, and his back blocked the huge wave of Yanli. Boom! The undifferentiated offensive made Yinxian, who was a little careless, directly out of the game. Jian Wushuang reacted, and waved his hand to form a barrier to protect the two. The little emperor who had withstood most of the great waves of dynamism turned more red, and his black shirt was mostly broken. Without him, I am afraid that it will be Jian Wushuang himself. Hold on, I will take you away. Looking at the little emperor with signs of fainting, Jian Wushuang sank in his heart, directly hugged his figure, and he was ready to escape. He had already made the worst plan in his heart, reaching for Xiantao with his palm in his arms. Don't, you must not give it. Little emperor looked up at Jian Wushuang, shaking his head slowly and firmly. Then we can see if we can rush out. Jian Wushuang said with a deep voice. The broken tarot Excalibur pointed straight in his hand. The young man Yuga came into the air with a smile. His palms were in the shape of a row of clouds, lowering his majesty. Holding the little emperor with his left arm, he lifted the Tailuo Excalibur in his right hand. Sword Wushuang took a deep breath and used the absolute sword. In such a situation, the mountains and rivers are exhausted, dying for survival. The most common sword to date has released the most terrifying power. This is a desperate sword that can only be released in desperate circumstances. And there is no upper limit. A sword can be regarded as a million swords, with a broken face. The male Zi's full blow even only existed for a moment, and then broke, like a boiling lake, all dissipated. Cough, early, long ago I knew you could stop this offensive, and I wouldn't do much. With the help of Jian Wushuang, Xiao Dijuan reluctantly said. His body is weak. Even if he understands the fairy style, he can't change his physique. Jian Wushuang pursed her lips slightly. It can be blocked now, but it may not be blocked just now. Little Emperor's mouth slightly tilted, and then looked forward. The strength is so disparate, I'm afraid this time. I really want to lose. What if something changes? Jian Wushuang said slowly. It seems to confirm his words. Chapter 4737. If you look closely, on the broad back of this giant ape, a slightly immature and thin figure, looking excitedly at what happened on the sky dome. More than 20 new faces of Yanxian, showing the trend of encirclement, wrapped Yanxian including Gongziyu into dumplings. The sun is coming. At this moment, Xiaodajin and Gongziyu, Gongzi Jiao all shouted the same name. The Comer is the one who has had two sides before, and is the only 7 emperor who has a good impression on the little emperor. Brother, is this your horse really pulling the wind? I am the first time to take the ferry as a horse. Sitting on the back of the strange ape, the 7 emperors looked at the little emperor's eyebrow dance. Xiaodajin frowned slightly, apparently did not expect the sun to intervene at this time. Gongziyu also looked at him in consternation, and then said in a deep voice, "What are you doing here? Do you want to fight for Xiantao too?" Third brother, don't get me wrong, I don't have much idea about that stuff. The young man scratched his head, and then raised his eyebrows. I'm just here to help the big brother. You and the second brother have done too much. Gongziyu heard the words and sneered. Are you looking for death? Even if you add 1, can you change the result? It's hard to say if you don't want to change, but don't you want to try it anyway? Gongzi Lin said, stretching a lazy waist on the back of the strange ape. Since you are looking for death, then I will solve you smoothly. The young man Yulanran smiled, and took the lead in attacking. When the young man saw it, he shot the strange ape's head and escaped directly. Almost at the same time, Yanxian, who was in the same camp as the sun, also dispatched one after another, and the melee was together. Jian Wushuang only felt the pressure on his body suddenly lightened, and there was no sense of urgency to resist hard. Nearly 50 Yanxian battles. The different Yanli martyrs are magnificent. Jian Wushuang looked at the young Sun Yu, who was on the offensive against his son, and his eyes began to flourish. Be careful, little emperor reminded in a low voice. He nodded, his palm lightly pressed against the handle of Tai Luo. His figure disappeared quietly like a ghost. Being full of attention, a sudden sense of crisis is about to push back the young sun. And the young Ziyu is almost a subconscious head. Xyla. However, everything was still too late. The knife was half an inch, almost nearly chopping off his entire head. Gong Ziyu quickly withdrew, and at the same time released Yanli self-protection. Looking at the mysterious young man dressed in a black ranger, Gong Ziyu only felt that the wound between his neck hurt into the bone marrow. His wrist shook, and the blood on the Tai Luo Excalibur fell, and Jian Wushuang looked at him calmly, healing the wound between the necks and necks. The madness in the eyes of the young Sun Yu disappeared, and he watched with caution. Being able to approach him unknowingly, and beheading again with another sword, such terrible strength, let the young son shudder in his heart. There is no extra cliché. Jian Wushuang directly lifted the sword and pressed it, and the broken Tai Luo Excalibur was full of momentum. With a sword cut, it was easy to break the strength of Gongziyu. He was terrified, and at the same time used all his resistance. Although the sword was broken, the swordsmanship was still there. Each sword carried a powerful force, and the forced young Sun Yu began to panic. At the same time that each sword style is sullen like water, it also opens and closes, making it difficult for the male Ziyu to use the corresponding force to cope. Although there is only one sword at a time, thousands of sword intentions are differentiated, and the more persecuted he is miserable. While Jian Wushuang is like a blacksmith, Gongziyu is an iron embryo, constantly being hammered. In the process of hammering, each of his swords is becoming more condensed. Gongziyu almost suffocated. Under such a showdown, was he actually regarded as a whetstone? Disgrace flooded his mind, and he was ready to release the immortal form desperately, crushing Jian Wushuang like a bug. But soon, Gongziyu was horrified to find that, in his current state, he could not evoke the fairy style. A powerful sword was cut down, and a shocking wound was directly plowed from the zipa bone of the Sun Ziyu. This sword almost cut him into 2 pieces from the middle. Gongziyu felt terrified. He found that the cold and death-like young man was far more terrible than he thought. If the little emperor brought him shock and confusion, Then the sword of Wushuang is the representative of coldness and death. When he realized the horror of life and death, everything was too late. Without even unnecessary nonsense, Jian Wushuang held up the broken sword in his hand, as if he had sinned and tried, and finally dropped the ultimate sword. But at the next moment, the change was abrupt. A pale red scroll swept quietly, while a beam of light directly penetrated the back of Jian Wushuang. The gentle blood of the sprayed the face of the young Sun Yu. Jian Wushuang's face was pale, and that sword failed to be cut in the end. Tarot Excalibur slipped from his hand and fell into the abyss. He also got rid of the force, like a fallen leaf, suddenly fell from the clouds. Jian Wushuang! Xiao Dijun exclaimed. Almost at the same time, he wanted to hold him, but a light red barrier blocked it. Gongzi walked out of the scroll and looked at him with a smile. It's really embarrassing. I had such a consequence when I missed it. I'm afraid he can't even get out of the game. Little Emperor's gaze changed from Sun Lung to anger. Young master corrects, you must die in my hands. Really? But in order to prevent this result from appearing, I will make your big brother completely disappear before this. The sun said in a tone that only the two of them could hear. In a round without any warm big sun traversing the sky dome, the black and white mixed colors reveal the silence and nothingness. This is a fairy style that belongs to the little emperor. The sun also started to be fanatical in his eyes, the most elusive, like the abyss. He also showed his strength at this moment. It seems that the turbid and unseparated atmosphere, the unknown but extremely suppressed atmosphere, appears like a mist. Although you cannot be headed in heaven, but it is also a good choice to add a lot to your weak body. It hurts. Feeling the gurgling stream flowing around him, Jian Wushuang, who had lost his consciousness, gradually became sober. At the moment, half of his body was soaked in the stream, and the black shirt on his body was mostly broken. He barely propped himself upside down and gasped slightly. Chapter 4738. And his chaotic hegemony body has also achieved immortality. Even if the fairy source is broken, if there is a point of obsession, it is enough to resurrect. This is really terrible, involving various complex levels. But Jian Wushuang can be sure that he can achieve immortal immortality, absolutely inseparable from the super-perfect life form. If he is not of such a physique, I am afraid that the previous blow is enough to make him disappear. The fragmented chest had fully recovered in a few breaths, but the fatal pain still caused the sword to have cold sweat from the temples. He propped himself up from the ground and began to look around. This is still the plane of the celestial realm, but because of the war, the most central position of the celestial realm, the earth has become a little bit apart. A series of fine cracks like spider webs separated the rivers and mountains, and the riverbed was blocked by broken rocks. At the moment, Jian Wushuang is located in a mountain stream that was destroyed. He fell from above the sky dome and directly smashed the entire Shenfeng out of a hole. But he did not expect that there was this dark space in this Shenfeng. Everything was still in a violent martyrdom. He looked at the dark red sky dome and wanted to rush up again to help. But the divine body was still in a state of recovery, and even simple manipulation of strength was impossible. In desperation, Jian Wushuang can only wait for the divine body to recover and move along the stream under his feet. The gurgling of the stream, which is completely transformed by the strong force, has nourished the dry meridians. As we move forward, this dim space is gradually filled with the faint blue color. Jian Wushuang felt a little restless. At the same time, layers of dark blue light began to cling to the surrounding stone walls. Could this be the place where Jin Wuyang hides his chance? He thought. There are nearly 400 Yinxian participants in this battle for Peach, but there is only one Xiantao, which cannot be divided equally. Therefore, Xinjiang distributes unknown geometric opportunities in this celestial realm for the Yinxian to find and understand. In a certain way, this is also a creation for Yin Xian, who can come to heaven to feast. Moving forward with curiosity, but not long afterwards, he reached the end of this hidden space. Looking into the eyes, only one side of the stone wall covered with fine grass. However, Jian Wushuang did not rush to leave. He still went forward, came to the stone wall, and reached out to get rid of the dense vine grass. The stone wall showed the true content, and a series of artificially carved ravines connected to each other and formed a complicated and obscure pattern. What kind of prohibition do these dry lines look like, blocking the way forward? If it were earlier, Jian Wushuang might have tried to dismantle it with violence, but now he can't even manipulate the force, let alone use violence. In the dark, he always felt that behind the stone wall, nothing was hidden. Slightly silent for a moment, Jian Wushuang cast his gaze on the stone walls on both sides behind him. As soon as his thoughts moved, he turned and let a ray of blue light clinging to the stone wall into his hand. After a moment of hesitation, Jian Wushuang pressed the palm of the beam around the stone wall. In an instant, the magnificent flower blooms. Wisps of blue light spontaneously poured into the gully lines on the stone wall, quickly rushed to fill the lines. The whole stone wall began to escape from the strange huamang, filling the dim space. Buzz! A deep buzzing sounded. The prohibition on the stone wall quietly worked, and at the same time a strong glory lit up, causing Jian Wushuang to subconsciously cover his eyes. At the same time a mildewy smell with a faint smell of decay passed into his nose. After the strong light dissipated, Jian Wushuang gazed at the front. He tried again in the consciousness. With just one finger, a magnificent galaxy is constructed in the consciousness. Among the galaxies constructed, he became the only master. Don't I be an emperor after all this journey? Jian Wushuang was somewhat unclear, so he slowly stood up and walked over in front of the photographic figure. Surprisingly, that person's physique did not look at Jian Wushuang, and it didn't help that he waved his palm. It's strange he can't see me, is he not a living person? Jian Wushuang secretly said, and then he extended his palm again, tentatively preparing to touch him. But at the next moment, the stunning figure suddenly raised his head, and his sharp sword-like gaze aimed at Jian Wushuang. Who is it? Jian Wushuang stepped back a few steps. His heart almost stopped beating. However, he later discovered that the person was not looking at him, but that he had spared him to look at the unknown. Jian Wushuang looked back and found no other people. He began to understand something. He entered this space by mistake, and the scene that happened was most likely a video that had not been sealed for many years. Then the photographing figure seemed to be talking to someone, a flash of pain in his eyes. No, I can't make this decision. The person's body retreated, and the pain in his eyes began to hesitate. But as time went on, the pain and hesitation in his eyes gradually shook. This photographic figure seems to have met the conditions with something unknown. In the end he said hard, yes. As these two words fell, the entire hidden space began to tremble, and the fine cracks directly covered the entire bluestone slab. The space seems to be collapsing. Jian Wushuang was too late to think about it, and hurriedly backed away, preparing to escape from this place. The tremors resounded. The hidden space began to fall apart, and countless rubble dropped. Fortunately, the channel can still persist without breaking. Jian Wushuang ran in steps, and when he was about to escape from this hidden space, he looked back. The image in the hidden space is dying, but at the time of dying, the photographing body image has been sublimated, and a unique luck has blessed it. Boom! The entire Xinfeng mountain collapsed completely, and even the hidden space was destroyed. Jian Wushuang stood on a mountain and looked at the broken Xinfeng, which was still raising dust, with a complex look. Everything I just experienced is like a dream, even if it is only a few days. It makes him seem to travel to an unknown era. Who was left behind in the scene just now? Gently holding the palm of his hand, Jian Wushuang found out that he didn't know when he had returned to its peak state, and it seemed that the utmost filling power could break through at any time. The sky vault, which was still in fierce fighting, now showed a strange silence, but Jian Wushuang knew that this battle for the peach has not ended. He could feel that the guy who had attacked him still had his breath on the sky. Since you haven't died, you have to do something you should do, such as revenge. On the soles of the feet, Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared, and the entire Xinfeng under his feet collapsed directly. Aren't you going to give up yet? Do you really want me to kill you here? Chapter 4740. The dark red sky has appeared, and there is a raging wind. There are very few Yinxian who can stand here. The slightly inferior young sun came, and dragged the young sun out of the game at the last minute. At this moment, only less than 10 figures are still standing. The young man's face is somber, and his white-toothed suit has been broken, and his long black hair is broken, and the band is dancing with the wind. Standing on the opposite side of him was a little emperor with a mouthful of blood and withered breath to the extreme. His palm holding the soft sword was shaking, but he still looked at the young man with scorn and sarcasm in his eyes. Finally say it, give Xiantao to me, and then get out of the game. The son's voice became colder, and the killing intentions in his eyes gradually disappeared. A little emperor with a bright red color on his cheek coughed out a ray of divine blood, and then said quietly, "You said, how many days have Xiantao been on this emperor? Should it be 6 days? It's been 6 days since the sun corrected his cold face, and Xiantao disappeared. During these 6 days, he had several opportunities to kill the little emperor, but he didn't play the killer because of some concerns. This also caused time to pass rapidly. Once Xiantao stayed in the hands of a certain Yinxian for 7 days, the battle for the peach was declared over. And this is the last day. You really don't plan to hand it to me?" The son took a step forward, and horrified Yanli swept up. Xiao Daijin's thin figure seemed to fall at any time, but there was no fear in his eyes at all, and the meaning of sarcasm was more obvious. "Idiot, don't you really think Xiantao is in my hand?" The young man corrected his gaze, and was about to speak. A stone infused with Yanli hit the back of his head without warning. "Fool, look here." A clear voice sounded, and looking around, a black-shirt ranger figure held Xiantao in his left hand, looking at him with a smile. The son corrected his pupils and shrank. He clearly remembered his blow, and he had already beheaded. "Why didn't you die? If I'm dead, how can I take revenge by hand?" Xiantao was thrust into his arms, Jian Wushuang calmly said. At the next moment he suddenly set off, carrying the endless momentum, and ran into the young man without fear. Looking at the re-entered figure, the little emperor spit out a deep breath and relaxed completely. One of the most magnificent Tianmen poles was pushed down, and the unparalleled surging power almost completely suppressed the sun at the moment of collision. At the same time, Jian Wushuang pulled out the Tai Luo Excalibur and slashed down with great force. A sword is worth 10,000 swords. The sword that has returned to the pinnacle is unparalleled. The sword style is wide open and wide, full of domineering sense of desperation. For a time, the oppressed son is difficult to fight back. Young master is very stubborn. At the same time he also understands why the young master Yu was difficult to beat before. This Yinxian is extraordinary. A star-shaped sword burst out in the stars, lakes and seas, and the horrible sword swept up, letting the unprepared son correct, and suffered a heavy loss. With a kick, Jian Wushuang backed away from the battle circle. The tooth-white kimono was completely broken, and the skin cut by thousands of sword intentions exuded Yin Hong Shun blood. The son's anger was extremely extreme, but the seemingly horrible sword intention was at the end, but only torn his clothes, not even serious injuries, which is simply an insult to him. He couldn't stand it. Between the palms of his hands, a pale red picture scroll spread out. At the same time, a silky misty chaotic atmosphere emerged behind the sun's correction, in which unimaginable power surged. Jian Wushuang also took away the contempt. He could feel this kind of move, and had already surpassed the existing state. "Damn things, since you still come back to die, then I will fulfill you." The son's uncontrollable rage broke out, and he stretched out his palms and snapped together. The silky misty chaos behind him vacated. Jian Wushuang tried to avoid it, but found that the pale red scroll that spread to his feet somehow seemed like a kind of prohibition, and he was firmly trapped in place. Two immortal fairy styles encircle Xiang Jian Wushuang. He simply cannot survive. There was even a sneer on the face of Gongzi Dingna Yinggu. The silky misty chaotic atmosphere, no accident swallowed the sword Wushuang. The Emperor Shao, who was watching from afar, was shocked in his heart, and he really understood the terrible son's correction. If he does not have a fairy-style body, There is no possibility to escape from his hands. And even if Wuxia is even more powerful, I am afraid it will not escape. This guy can never die so easily. Xiao Dijuan shook his head and looked closely into the distance. There, it seemed as though the chaotic breath of the unknown monster was eating away. There was a flash of pleasure in Gong Zisheng's face, looking at someone who dared to rebel against him and died in front of him. There was nothing more pleasant than this. Looking at the squirming chaotic breath, thinking that the time was almost running, he was ready to recall with a wave of his hand. However, at the next moment, an abrupt peak of the mountain peak suddenly burst into that chaotic atmosphere. At the same time, a vertical waterfall falls from the sky dome and falls completely. Another big day emerged out of thin air, glorious. Such strange weather actually dispelled the chaotic atmosphere in a moment. That's the most difficult fairy style. Young Master Xunyuan opened his eyes and looked at this scene in disbelief. After the chaotic breath completely dissipated, the thin and firm figure appeared again. Sword Wuxia at the moment, his eyes reflected the boundless stars. In his eyebrows, a galaxy composed of 7 stars is moving slowly. Faced with the correction of the sun, he pointed out. The giant water roared by Yanli swept away directly. At the same time, long winds, mountains, rivers, big sun, and other natural scenes appeared one after another. The unimaginable landscape appeared on the stage at the moment, and all of them hit the sun. Jian Wuxuang's eyes gradually became clear. You reading www. Akanshu? He slowly raised the corner of his mouth. The magnificent galaxy that was constructed in his mind earlier was visualized by him now. The so-called mountains and rivers are just a mountain river. What the heart thinks is self-made. All these wonders are what Jian Wuxuang thought. Whatever I want, I use everything. At this moment, Jian Wuxuang can use everything in this entire heaven. Chapter 47-41. He did not think of it anyway. The guy, instead of not dying, manipulated the fairy style to return. A seemingly inconspicuous and impenetrable guy actually realized the fairy style, which made him not shocked. It should be understood that being able to comprehend the immortal style means that the realm of Yanxian is harmonious, and it touches a higher level. Understanding and making good use of it further illustrate its terrible point. Breaking through Yanxian will only be a matter of time. Since the ancient times, I do know how many top cultivations are difficult to enter the realm of Yanxian. Above Yanxian, such a state of delusion makes Yanxian desperate. Yanxian is a watershed, even if Shou Yuan is endless, but he can't feel the mysterious luck, he can only despair. At the same time, even if it is an extraordinary fairy, there are very few who are able to die. The state cannot be broken through to another level, and the endless Shou Yuan is like a trap and a cage to them. Yanxian, who has not broken the shackles, may die in a fierce battle with the turmoil of one side of the sky, or he may self-cut off the source of the fairy, and will not even enter the cycle. This is a path of cultivation without retreat. The vast silence is far more than the brutal killing. The first step in breaking through shackles is to realize the fairy style. Right now, this ensuing spectacle is not a fairy style, and what would it be? The little emperor was already shocked. When he saw the figure, like the emperor of a party, he ordered the scene of the river. The scene he was most unwilling to see in his heart appeared. So, is this his real strength? Enough! You stop me! The sun's eyes turned red. He waved his palms and suddenly torn the mountain that suppressed him. The series of fierce battles have made the Sun Zijing tired, especially in the previous fairy style of the Little Emperor, which has consumed more than half of his physical strength. The several Yanxian present were all retreating consciously, for fear of becoming a cannon fodder. Sword Wuxuang, dotted with Sanggu galaxies, looked at him indifferently. The young man corrected, gasping slightly, with a little hysterical. Do you think that by just hitting the fairy style, do you want to deal with me? Prepare to regret it. The pale red scroll that stretched for thousands of miles became fuller, and the young man stood in the center of the scroll, slowly condensing his vigorous strength. Immediately afterwards, the picture scroll twisted up and formed a real shadow. Every real shadow is a sun's correction. The light red real shadow condenses like substance, all encircling the sword Wushuang. You guys, you never see the coffin without tears. Since you have to fight to the end, then I have to send you to see the coffin. The young man smiled strangely, and after whispering a word of extinction, he was swallowed by the darkness within the scroll space of the instant. Outsiders could not detect the scene at all. Nearly 100 real shadows in the entire scroll space moved at this moment, carrying vigorous vigor and rushing forward. And Jian Wushuang noticed the change as soon as possible. He suddenly waved his hand, and a round of Yaorao hung up, shining 100 miles. The indescribable beam of light barely ripped open the darkness, and those real shadows running forward and back struck the sun's beam, and turned into a pile of mud directly on the ground. But Jian Wushuang immediately felt something was wrong. The real shadows that had turned into mud were tumbling, but in an instant, they turned into thousands of chains, trapping him from bottom to top. In the next moment, this strangely dark space actually gave birth to countless strange eyes. Each pair of eyes is joking, cruel, or indifferent, as if one side is an endless abyss, which makes one sink into it at a glance. Jian Wushuang was trapped by chains, unable to move at all, and could only watch the eyes above his head madly eating the strength in his body. Outside this extremely dark space, the corner of Mourinho's mouth reveals a meaningless smile. If it's not in heaven, I will treat you well. Then he turned slowly and faced the lonely little emperor quietly and said, Your reliance is already one step ahead. You haven't quit yet. Are you going to let me throw you out? Xiaodijin looked at Gong Zizing coldly. With his own intuition, he knew that Jian Wushuang couldn't get out so easily. Sure enough, when the smile on the sun's corrective face had not receded, the extremely dark space behind him stretched out. A wailing cry wailed in the wind, and a huge amount of mixed black bursted out. The shape of a hand Qingshenfeng is coming. Jian Wushuang was indifferent in his eyes, and then faced with the younger son, he threw the Shenfeng in his hand. Under such an unexpected situation, Gong Zizing didn't even make a sound, and was overwhelmed by Shenfeng who came from the face. The Shenfeng, which was 1,000 feet tall, rose in the face of the storm, and turned into a mountain of 1,000 feet tall. With an irresistible power, he sealed his entire body in the roots of the mountain. The earth collapsed, the Tianhe River was against the current, and the vision was engulfed. Adhering to the principle of taking advantage of his illness and killing his life, Jian Wushuang condensed his strength on the soles of his feet, and then stomped on the top of Shenshan Mountain with a shocking and powerful foot. Boom! Thousands of gods can't stand this foot, and a deep gully has cracked. Julie went straight to the surface, and the young man who was under the pressure of the root of the mountain corrected, and he was so angry that when he was ready to rush out, he almost kicked the fairy source. As soon as his eyes were dark, the blood of Yin Hong spewed out of his nose. Just as Jian Wushuang was ready to take a break and took off his son's life, there was a loud sound from the morning and evening drums. The time has come. Please stop here and rush to heaven. In a black robe, the extremely mysterious Yubo appeared in the sky, and some murky eyes looked at each Yinxian, who only survived to the end. A flash of Sun Han flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Yu reading www. When Akhonshu.com was about to release the final thunder blow, it was found that the air seemed to stagnate, which actually restrained Yanli. He seemed to feel something, and turned to look at Yubo who appeared in the heaven. Facing each other, Yubo's turbid eyes had a subtle fluctuation, and then he turned his head and waved his sleeves, and then sent the son who was sealed under the Shenfeng back to heaven. Please rush to heaven immediately. After saying this last sentence, the whole heaven was completely silent. The remaining Yinxian glanced at each other, and then all fled here quickly, rushing to heaven. Slowly spit out a breath, Jian Wushuang finally relaxed. This half-year-long battle for the peach, so far, ended with the victory of Jian Wushuang Jinfeng Gongzi, holding Xiantao. Chapter 47-42. No one of Tianting Yinxian can guess this will be the end. Jian Wushuang is like a shock, breaking into every line of sight. It's unbelievable. For the first time, Xiantao and the feast was taken away by Yin Xian except the 7 emperors. Moreover, Jian Wushuang is not the little emperor's companion, so this fairy peach in his hand is completely owned by him. Taking out the fairy peach containing the shackles of numerology from his arms, he didn't even miss it, like an ordinary fruit. Hey then! Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, and threw the fairy peach to the little emperor. A stream of light flashed across the sky, and then fell into his hands. Looking at the fruit with diffusive power in his hand, Zai Audijin raised his brows slightly. He just had to bite a bit, and the chance in Xiantao would rush into the body to help him break through. But at the next moment, the little emperor's palm opened and closed, and the fairy peach was divided into 2 halves. Hey then! He said the same, throwing half of Xiantao to Jian Wushuang. The two smiled at each other, and then bit the fairy in their respective hands. Fairy rhyme is vast, smoke is flowing. In the heavens where singing and dancing are still flat, the silence is extremely extreme at the moment. Emperor Zhenliang, who was sitting on the throne, suppressed the anger in a pair of captivating eyes. Under his next head, all the emperors were silent and dejected. Only then did the sun, who was awake from the coma, correct his eyes, and his eyes were full of coldness. The 2 figures walked slowly into the heavenly palace. The little emperor, who has changed into a luxurious kimono, with a smile on his face, does not care that all his eyes gather. The sword has no double-faced color, and is indifferent, slowly pacing forward, as if there are mountains and rivers in his chest, vaguely revealing the breath of dignity. Faced with this kind of scene, he did not panic, and even wanted to say a small scene in his heart. Before he entered Dianhuan, standing at the pinnacle of the divine universe and controlling the avenue, let him raise his hand and throw it in his feet with an indelible camera. Even Zhen Wuyang, who was sitting on the throne, had a weird feeling of sitting upright when facing this young man. But this feeling was quickly erased from his mind, and Zhen Wuyang snapped the case suddenly. Black smoke. All Yinxian shivered. They naturally understood why the emperor was so angry. In the battles for winning the peach several times, almost all of the taboos that cannot be committed have been committed this time. They formed a camp with each other, and became a weapon in the hands of various emperors, and the eagle dog under the seat. However, the most important point is that the iron rule that the heaven cannot be stained with blood is broken by the little emperor and the weird guy beside him. So at this moment, the Yinxian who participated in the battle for the peach all looked at the 2 of them meaningfully. I have it knelt down for me, something that doesn't work. Zhen Wuyang screamed again, almost breaking the case in front of him with his palm. However, the 2 figures were motionless. Jian Wushuang only felt inexplicable. His eyes looked aside. The little emperor said a little in the corner of his mouth and said softly, "There is always a reason why the emperor wants me to kneel. After all, I am an ineffective thing and can't stand in front of them." After he finished speaking, he looked at the other 6 emperors, and his sarcasm was beyond words. The Emperor Zhenliang was very angry, and it was another case. "I am your father. Is this reason enough?" "Enough." The little emperor knelt on one knee. "Enough." Seeing Emperor Shao kneel, Zhen Wuyang's complexion slightly eased, and a pair of photographing eyes scanned the crowd. "It's really black smoke. A good game. This is the end of the point. But even dozens of Yinxian have fallen. Do you have the right to ignore this iron law?" The resentful young son Yu stood up at the moment. Back to the emperor. "All the deceased Yinxian were all done by Gongzi Yen and the fellow around him. We have not missed. Do you think your mistakes are lighter than them?" Zhen Wuyang looked at him. "Shunfeng, who supported the heavens, was destroyed by your own hands and tried to break the rules. Is it you who wants to use this to open the Xiantao ban?" Gong Ziyu cold sweat instantly fell. He did not expect that his meaningless actions will be found the real intention. "Emperor, listen to me. No need to explain. I will consciously go to heaven realm to get 100 sticks, but 1 stick will not work." Zhen Wuyang said angrily. Master Ziyu's face was pale. All the 100 sticks in this world were all held by the masters. Each stick was enough to make ordinary Yinxian suffer. If these 100 sticks go down, I am afraid that it will be difficult for him to get out of bed for 100 years. Follow the order. Young Master Yu gritted his teeth and returned to his original seat, and he even almost laughed out loud with his unfamiliar young master Emojin Wuyang said in a deep voice. This time of the Xiantao battle, your performances have disappointed me. Everyone will consciously go to the Celestial Leadership 50 in the future, to introspect. All Yanxian, faced with a bitter face, did not get much benefit from participating in the Feast of the Heavenly Court, and ended up being hit by 50 sticks. But no one dared to refute, all bowed, complied. At this moment, Zai Audijin coughed up artificially, and there was a hint of red on his pale cheeks. Emperor, the sun is weak, so I can't lead the club. Emperor Zhenliang heard the words, nodded and flicked his hand. The sun is exempted from punishment, and the rest of the people are still punished as usual. As soon as this remark came out, all the other 6 emperors were angered, glaring at the little emperor, but they dared not say anything, for fear of getting more sticks. It seemed to be afraid that Zhong Yanxian felt that he was partial, and Zhen Wuyang then said, but Master Yang's behavior is bad, so fine him to listen to the wind table wall for 10 years. It's okay not to say this. As soon as I said it, all Yanxian's eyes almost burned the little emperor to ashes. It is said to listen to the punishment on the wall of the wind table. Isn't it more appropriate to go on holiday? The entire listening typhoon contains thousands of peach forests, immense bamboo fairy tales, among which there are fairy tales of heavenly courts, and from time to time fairy celestial dancers are dancing. In this environment, can you think about it? What are you waiting for before punishing? Isn't it enough? Zhen Wuyang Wei's voice resounded. All Yanxian heard the words and hurriedly rushed out of heaven, fearing to take the next step. Chapter 47-43. There was silence in the heavenly court, and Jian Wushuang looked at him. I'm not wrong, and the penalty can't be said naturally. Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice. Heaven does not allow blood to be contaminated, but you have killed more than a dozen Yanxian. Isn't it a matter of seeing the rules of heaven? Jian Wushuang calmed himself. If I do and have to deter them, I see A and T stand here now. People do and offend me, I do and have to bother. But if people offend me and wipe out threats, it's the best choice. I don't think of any kind of threat. It's not a threat to change a place, whether it's in heaven or anywhere. All I can do is wipe out these threats by any means. Heaven was so quiet that the needle fell, but only Jian Wushuang's voice was recalling, and all the elders looked at him in a fixed manner. They didn't expect that this guy who suppresses the Yanxian powerfully in the realm and sweeps away the threats with his own strength. The words and behavior style are so similar. Zhen Wuyang sat on the throne without a word, staring blankly at Jian Wushuang. At the same time, a great power came quietly in the heavenly court. Jian Wushuang only felt an unspeakable pressure, sinking on every inch of his skin, just like the 100,000 Shinfeng peaks. He bit the tip of his tongue without trace, and even did not exert his strength, resisting it with the strength of his body. Yu Bo, who was standing behind Zhen Wuyang, also raised his muddy eyes at the moment to look at Jian Wushuang, and then watched his nose again. The little emperor also noticed that when he looked cold, he immediately pulled out the soft sword around his waist, and the sword cut off the pressure. Emperor, we are tired, we have to explain things quickly, let's go to sleep. To face the wall. Little emperor withdrew his soft sword, looking at Zhenliang with a look of anger. Looking at the little emperor who was not afraid and unscrupulous, Zhen Wuyang was surprisingly not angry, wanted to say something, and finally sighed, without a good air. Go away. Zai Audijin raised his eyebrows, and then pulled the sword Wushuang ready to leave. Wait. Zhen Wuyang's magnificent voice sounded again. Let Yu Chang supervise you and think about it, and you will regret the lack of it. The old man standing behind Zhen Wuyang ordered the two of them step by step, and then issued a restraint with his left and right hands, tying Jian Wushuang and Zai Audijin directly, and then quickly left the Tianting Giant Hall, and rushed to the listening wind tower. When Zai Audijin's figure disappeared, a moment of loneliness flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes. Zongxianjia, we rarely get together, let's go to the Yuega Pavilion for a drink. You Bo, let me go if I can't do it. Although I have thought about it, I don't have to imprison personal freedom. In a magnificent place with thousands of peach blossoms and a breeze, the two are bound together, sitting back to back in a pavilion. Jian Wushuang was very depressed, but it was only 10 or 20 Yinxian beheaded, and he was fined for 10 years. Although the scenery is excellent, it is a bit uncomfortable to sit trapped in this pavilion and sit for another 10 years. The little emperor with his back to back was also helpless. He said a good word and didn't let Na Yu release his imprisonment. Little emperor, you will be asleep in 10 years. Yu Bo raised his eyes and looked at him. Then he began to sit down not far away. When I saw that Yu Bo was already sitting, Xiaodajan pushed the sword without any trace and whispered, I have a soft sword around my waist. You gently pull it out and cut the chain. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and even if he started to touch the waist of the little emperor, the sword is in my belt. What are you doing under my waist? Mistakes, your hands are a bit numb. Don't move. Can I stay still? That's my itchy flesh. After some hard struggles, Jian Wushuang finally pulled out the soft sword and cut off the chain on Xiao Dijuan. Shaking his hand, Xiaodajan got up and took the soft sword, and also broke the chain on his body. Go, will take you to a good place. Little Emperor's rare expression of complacency, with a wave of his hand, took Jian Wushuang away. Jian Wushuang was hard to quit, looked back at Yu Bo, who was still sitting, and then left the pavilion with him. Just as the two left, Yu Bo slowly opened his eyes, shook his head helplessly, and continued to watch the nose. The two were almost blindly saying that I was leaving. How could Yu Bo not find out? But he had nothing to stop, and allowed them to leave. As long as you don't listen to the typhoon, everything is safe. Xinbu was lingering among these thousands of miles of peach blossom forest, and Jian Wushuang's tense state of mind had been relaxed a little. From the mouth of the little emperor, I learned that almost all of the noble fairies in the 9 heavens, surrounding the heavens, lived in this listening typhoon. It only took more than 1,000 steps to make a peach fairy sitting on the peach branch, holding out the beautiful fairy wine. Brother Jian, how much wine is there? He took off 2 pots of peach blossoms in Taoxian's hands, and Xiaodajan directly gave Jian Wushuang a pot. It's okay. Jian Wushuang did not quit, holding up the thin ear jug and drinking for a long time. The wine line with a hint of powder enters the throat, and the sweet and sweet meaning is dispersed in the peach forest. Little Emperor smiled slightly, and also learned Jian Wushuang, holding up the jug to drink. Although it seems that there is only 1 pot of peach blossom brewed by Taoxian, there are holes in the pot. Jian Wushuang drank about 100 pounds at once, and then stopped, only to feel transparent, unable to say that it was comfortable. The little emperor on the side was like a whale swallowing a cow, and he drank a jug of wine. I said, you're so drunk you panic? Jian Wushuang asked. For their immortal Yinxian, things like wine, whether sincere or not, are already drunk. Even if it is fairy wine, it is nothing but the taste of the throat, not drunk. But he looked at the little emperor, who had a hazy meaning in his eyes, and found that things were not so simple. No, are you drunk? Jian Wushuang asked again. The little emperor with a red face heard the words and shook his head slowly. No, I'm not drunk. How can I get drunk in this area? Listening to the sound of this already big tongue, Jian Wushuang was helpless, and took the hip flask in his hand. Hey Xiao Taoxian, give this seed a pot again and ask for aging. Jian Wushuang never imagined that as a Yinxian, she could be drunk by the local liquor. Don't drink you. What will happen to you later? You will be taken back again. Thousands of pounds of wine entered the abdomen, although the little emperor was still awake, but his feet were already floating. Chapter 47-44. If there is no sword Wushuang carrying, I am afraid that even the road will be unstable. Brother Jian, good brother, only you are still by my side. Drunken and dim, Xiao Dijuan murmured. My son Xian has never been as happy as he is today. Without you, I wouldn't be able to step on the soles of those guys, so as to vent my hatred. It's you, let me see some hope. Xiao Dijuan smiled, and pressed his fist against Jian Wushuang's chest. In addition, I have said long ago that there is a guarantee for the king. Everything is expected. Smelling the smell with a faint smell, Jian Wushuang stepped back slightly and said softly, "Sleep for a while. Wake up and talk about other things." "Can't sleep. Since we came here to listen to the Wind Pavilion, I will take you to a good place." Little Emperor's face hung with a meaningful smile. The next moment he directly took the sword Wushuang, moving the clouds and driving the fog, targeted straight ahead. "Where are you going?" "You'll know later. Definitely a good place to linger." Immortal rhythm. The peach blossom forest that stretches for thousands of miles was left behind, replaced by green bamboos. The whole listening typhoon is equivalent to the back garden of the heavenly court, and it is extremely beautiful. All fairy spirits and fairies play in it, and it is beautiful. Confused by Shao Emperor's sword Wushuang, he vaguely felt that nothing good happened. The more I walked in this listening typhoon, there was a faint smell of incense in the clouds. "Where are you going?" Jian Wushuang confirmed again and again. Xiao Daijin's eyes became more and more hazy. "A good place is definitely a place that Brother Jian likes. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Today I will take you to a turn." No longer talking, Jian Wushuang had to follow him. When the clouds were gathered, a beautiful flowery paradise land appeared in front of us. The little emperor seemed a bit impatient, and the two of them stopped on the top of a low mountain. "Brother Jian, and follow me." It was only tens of steps away from the top of the mountain, and the little emperor rushed to the top in one arrow. Jian Wushuang followed, and at the same time he also had doubts about what was going to make him so excited. Striding up the mountain, Jian Wushuang looked forward. With just one glance, his eyes were completely round, and his eyes revealed unbelievable. Stepping over this mountain top, I saw that in this fairy-like clear river water, there were nearly 1,000 fairies bathing in it. The beautiful picture is unobstructed. Silver bell-like playful sounds echoed in the valley, and they were laughing at each other, living like a real fairy bathing picture. Just glanced at it. Jian Wushuang squatted hurriedly, completely hidden in the fairy flower. "Did you drink too much fake wine? Is this where we can come?" Jian Wushuang was a little annoyed, and he was very angry that the little emperor brought him to this place. Xiao Dijuan also had some doubts in his hazy eyes. He rubbed his eyes vigorously and fixed his eyes for a few more times before murmuring, "No, why did you get here? Hurry up." Jian Wushuang apparently didn't want to stay here any longer. If this was discovered, reputation damage would be a trivial matter. It wouldn't be good to be caught and slammed. These seemingly delicate fairies are all real immortals. The little emperor nodded confusedly, and the two got up and prepared to run. "Oh, who stepped on my hair?" The two froze, turning back slowly. I saw in the cluster of flowers behind him, a small flower fairy was rubbing his head to wake up. Face to face, a cry of exclamation rang through the valley. "Sister, sister, it's them, just peeking at you taking a shower." At this moment, Wuxia said with his hands on his hips, pointing at Jian Wushuang and Audiobook. At the same time, nearly 1,000 fairies who landed from the water have already jumped to the top of the mountain, blocking the two in the middle. They all looked bad, murderous eyes, and wished to eat them alive. "This is a big misunderstanding. We accidentally entered here and left." Jian Wuwei was embarrassed. Obviously, this excuse could not convince him. Next, Audiobook closed his eyes and fell asleep. "Sister, don't believe their bullshit. I have long seen that this young man is a color embryo. Do you believe they will intrude here? Obviously it has been a long time." A man in a thin purple shirt fairy, Lume, raised an angry voice. Another fairy in a yellow shirt was embarrassed. "I have long seen that the emperor's eldest son is not a good person, and Chen Qing beside him is not a good person, and he is naturally not a good person. Yes, never let them go." All fairies echoed, but at the forefront of these fairies, a slightly older full-featured white shirt fairy didn't make a sound. Her Cheong nose moved slightly, and she was already aware of the alcohol on the little emperor. "Did he drink?" Fairy white shirt inquired. Jian Wushuang nodded. "I drank some in Taolin before, so I broke into here by mistake, and hope the fairy will forgive me." Fairy Baishan didn't seem to want to embarrass him, but he only said slowly after carefully examining the swordsmanship. Death is exempt. Living sin is inescapable. No matter if you are unintentional or sincere, you can't run this day. Now, sisters, just take a breath and hit the dead. Jian Wushuang instantly moved, running his whole body and running away with all his strength. And the little emperor who pretended to be sleeping, after hearing this sentence, the alcohol awakened most of the time, with a speed not much slower than Jian Wushuang, and fled the sea of flowers with all his strength. But there are too many fairies. In order to chase down the two, even all kinds of supernatural powers are used. Chaos Fist is still killing the master, not to mention these shameful fairies. A beating was already a deadly thing. Don't touch me, it still hurts in my face. In a misty cloud above the pavilion on the top of the mountain, two black shirts sat side by side on the eaves. Brother Jian, it's really my fault. I'm guilty of you. I couldn't drink anymore. It was just a sudden when the alcohol was up that I didn't know how to take you to the place where they bathed. But there is nothing in the world. I have no thought of peeking at all. It is really the wrong place. Shut up, the past will be over. Also, Brother Jian, I'm really not a color embryo. On the eaves of the pavilion, the two figures were speechless, and if they looked closely, the original handsome faces of these two men were all swollen, and they suffered from some serious skin trauma. Chapter 47-45. Jian Wushuang's cheeks were red and swollen due to the dodge, and he was far from the shock of Shao Emperor's face that had been hammered and swollen. These fairies seemed to have determined that Xiaodagen is the real color embryo, and took care of him with all his strength. But Jian Wushuang escaped the disaster. After picking a cloud and waving it on his face, Xiaodagen went on. Brother Jian, in fact, the place I want to take you to is a place called Jiantian in this heavenly court. I see, Brother Jian. The sword in your waist is broken, and I want to find another one. Or just blend the sword in the sword heaven. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and also believed some of what he said. After all, from the perspective of the little emperor's previous style of acting, it was not easy to come up and take him peeking at the fairy to take a bath. Where is the Jiantian you mentioned? Jian Wushuang asked. Probably, it's a place to put your obsession, said the little emperor. The people who slept there were the obsessions of some old brothers who were fighting with my emperor. Jian Wushuang nodded and stopped talking. The two rested on the roof of the pavilion for a few days, before leaving for Jiantian. Out of the listening typhoon, at the edge of the heavenly realm of heaven, a small world in the chaotic haze is reflected in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Even with the strength of his immortal realm, he can't explore what is in this chaotic world. But judging from the strong and utter demise of the atmosphere from time to time, any obsession here is probably a terrible existence during his lifetime. Led by the little emperor, after entering the chaotic misty mist, it is really into the so-called sword sky. One step to the ground, raising waves of dust. Jian Wushuang looked around, only to see that the eyes were all endless gray sandstone. The dried trunks of the trees were facing the sky, like the same way to cover the face and weep. This gray sand surface extends all the way to the invisible distance and intersects the sky dome. Stay on the heart, the killing breath here and the obsession are too heavy. If it is eroded, it will be difficult to pull out. Shao Emperor Shen Sheng reminded. Jian Wushuang nodded. From the first moment he entered the Jiantian, he felt the whole world, almost completely composed of the meaning of killing, and an unspeakable obsession. It is hard for him to imagine that there will be such a place in this peaceful heaven. Seemingly aware of the intrusion of external forces, the sword sky and sky began to fluctuate, and a tremendous obsession was shuttled. The little emperor waved a golden seal, and then his obsession disappeared. It was only a few dozen breaths of time to travel through the sword sky, and a black stone giant palace, which was located in the gray sand, appeared. Perhaps no one had set foot here. The giant hall was almost half buried in the gray sand, and it seemed reckless and lonely. In this giant palace, it is the place where my emperor's older brothers put their obsession. Little emperor looked at Jian Wushuang. Your sword is unmatched. But the next guy in this temple is normally. It will definitely help your kendo. Jian Wushuang heard the words and couldn't help but think of the set of swords in his arms. If he really had the horror of the swordsmanship, he could print it down and watch it carefully. With a wave of hand, she pushed open the door of Shun Shun Feng Qi, and a familiar taste of hot iron was introduced into Jian Wushuang's nasal cavity. For swordsmen, this kind of iron and fire breath is the most intimate breath. This is the taste of casting swords. Sword Wushuang, who was originally calm at heart, could not wait to see the man in the mouth of the little emperor. The whole giant hall is wide and huge, and there are no rules in the building. The whole hall is like a burning furnace tripod, and the whole ground seems to be like magma, emitting a red color. Jian Wushuang sweeps the entire main hall, except for the seats of 100 seats. Only the fading murals on the surrounding walls are a bit noticeable. Due to a long time ago, this mural has faded and peeled off most, but Jian Wushuang can still guess that these murals should depict the most tragic war. The heavens are torn apart, and countless Yin Xian, who is going to succeed, are dying, determinately. Jian Wushuang did not delve into the meaning of these murals. He believes that all these heavens have a tragic past, and everything in the past cannot be changed. Little Emperor didn't seem to be here for the first time, and was very familiar with the sword Wushuang. After leaving the main hall, the air began to change from stuffy to dry. Even the diffusive force that escapes outside the body has the meaning of being burned, which shows how high the temperature is. This guy is unspoken and silent, but when it comes to casting swords, he said that nobody dared to talk about the second. As he moved forward, the little emperor said, "In addition, he is the only disciple under the seat of an old friend of my emperor, and the sword is unfathomable. Speaking of my emperor's old friend, it is the only one I have seen, the sword immortal with the best swordsmanship." Jian Wushuang listened quietly. As for the current situation of Jian Xian and Dian Huan, he has not yet come into contact with him, and the only one he has encountered so far is only the sword fairy Ding Bai, who has an amazing face in the divine universe. Just a tremendous sword. Wan Jian was overshadowed. However, Jian Wushuang then thought abruptly, before going to heaven, there was a mysterious man who did not appear from the beginning to the end of the interception, but he ripped hundreds of thousands of miles with his own sword Tianyu, beheaded dozens of Yin Xian. Will the mysterious man be a sword fairy? There is no answer. Some people or things may always be a shock. In order to let this guy concentrate on casting the sword, I concealed all the swords from the entire sword day for him. The last time I met, or during the last heavenly feast, I don't know if this guy has made any progress now. Yu reading. www.okanshu.com. Walking forward, I do not know how long it took. When the ground beneath my feet disappeared, the entire giant hall reached its end. But the next scene shocked Jian Wushuang's eyes. I saw behind the giant palace there was a chasm of chasm, and in this chasm, there is purple magma flowing from the center of the earth, roaring in it. Numerous real swords hang high above the sky, and each real sword slowly drops silvery white water droplets from the tip of the sword. Jian Wushuang's looks are even more incredible. Every silver white drop is actually a sword. Solid figurative sword meaning. What kind of technique is it that can actually refine the sword in the true sword? Chapter 47-46. The so-called kendo and so-called sword intentions are all illusions, and they can be carried only by using the medium. The blade itself is a medium, and divine power, virtual power, and even more profound mysterious power are the ways of carrying and figuring. But this moment really shocked Jian Wushuang. These sword intentions, without the will of the master, there is no way to guide, only the blade itself which finally acts as an intermediary. But they were actually refined and turned into a drop of silver white droplets. And these sword-like water droplets also dripped from the sky dome into the abyss of that day. Because the temperature is terribly hot, the magma here is a strange fuchsia. Even the true core temperature of the sun can never be compared to this magenta magma. It is too hot. These sword-like drops of rain did not drip into the magma after falling, but they seemed to be connected to one place, as if they were connected by something. It was only then that Jian Wushuang was able to find that under the abyss of the sky, there was still a hearth placed in the center of the magnificent magma. This statue seems to be in the burning furnace tripod, as if refining to create a magnificent day. 10,000 strands of golden ons overflowing from the tightly stitched furnace tripod dazzling. Those swords like water droplets were all led into the furnace. At the same time, there was another imposing figure, which attracted Jian Wushuang's eyes. I saw it on the side of the furnace, the height of the height, and the naked upper body, the hammer without any emotion, fell on a red sword embryo, sparks overflowing. Such a shocking picture makes Jian Wushuang have a feeling. There is no complexity and subtlety of kendo sword intention. Some are pure iron and fire. Sword makers need a lot of perseverance and great understanding to be able to cast a sword of heaven and earth. This blend of iron and fire is most breathtaking. After 2 or 3 calls, Jian Wushuang recovered. Brother Jian, watched together at close range? Xiao Dijuan smiled. Suppressing the inner restlessness, Jian Wushuang said slowly, "Okay." The 2 Yanxian fell into the abyss of the sky. The sturdy figure with the iron hammer in hand. I didn't feel the crimson sword embryo with all my heart coming from outsiders. Stepping on this earth floating on the magma like a lone boat, Jian Wushuang felt that the force outside the body began to burn. "Beichunim here." The little emperor spoke aloud, with a smile in his eyes. After the massive figure hit the sword embryo with a heavy hammer, he stopped the mechanical hammer and turned to look. A black cheek stained with iron shavings is almost unable to tell where the facial features are. However, Jian Wushuang saw a row of bright teeth. "Brother Yan," the little emperor smiled. "I thought you were stupid, but I still remember me." The height of her body is between several breaths. She shrinks to her normal height, and then runs quickly. His naked upper body, his muscular skin, all covered with flowing clouds and water lines, looked very profound. "Brother Yan, how come you have come here? I remember that it was not long since you last came here." The mixed figure with flowing clouds and water lines scratched his head. The little emperor said helplessly, "It has been a year since you last saw this time. This time it is a feast of heaven." "Actually, after another year, I don't feel anything," said the figure, sucking his lips. "I don't know when my master will come back." "You will be back soon. You just need to wait." Xiao Dijuan raised an eyebrow and smiled, and then put his palm on Jian Wushuang's shoulder. "Introduce you, Brother Jian Wushuang Jian." "Ding Beichun." The black face also grinned and grinned. One of Jian Wushuang Bao's smiles. Deep in his heart, he felt that the guy with big white teeth in front of him, who smiled, was not as hard to touch as he had imagined. Looking at the fiery magma that was rolling around, Zai Odigen said, "Beichun, it's been several years, and it's time for you to go out and travel. After all, it's too long for you to stay here alone." He reached out and wiped a handful of iron shavings on his face. The young man named Ding Beichun said, "When master will come to pick me up, I'm going to leave. Now I'm just casting my sword, and casting a sword sheath for the teacher." Jian Wushuang was slightly surprised, but did not expect Ding Beichun to cast a sword sheath only. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but ask, "The materials and sword intentions made in this furnace are all prepared for casting the scabbard?" Ding Beichun nodded. "Yes, these things are not worthy of my master. I will barely make these things into a scabbard and give it to my master." Jian Wushuang opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. There was a wry smile in the corner of his mouth. Ding Beichun's sentence is really terrifying. With so many supreme swords, it is only suitable for casting into a scabbard. The little emperor is also a natural expression, which confirms Ding Beichun's words. "By Beichun, I came here this time, and I also have something to ask for," said Xiao Dijuan. "Brother Jian has a sword that he wears with him. Is it possible to repair it?" Ding Beichun did not hesitate. "Naturally, can you show me the broken situation?" Jian Wushuang nodded, then pulled out the Tailuo Excalibur from his waist. The sword body came out of the sheath, and issued a clear voice. Although the sword body had broken from the middle, it did not affect Chong Xiao's sharp intention at all. Ding Beichun's eyes suddenly lit up, took the broken Tailuo Excalibur, looked it over carefully, and then said, "It's incredible. Such a good sword actually contains great luck." Jian Wushuang heard the words and nodded secretly in his heart. It seemed that Ding Beichun was the true master of sword forging. He was able to perceive the luck in Tai Luo Excalibur the first time. As one of the seven-handed pole ancestors in the divine universe, the Tai Luo Excalibur contained in it was naturally terrifying. This is why the Tarot Excalibur is broken. The sword Wushuang is still worn by the side. The luck and other mysterious and profound things. There are too many thoughts of controlling the road, which can deepen the perception of sitting. How can it be completely repaired? Xiao Dijuan asked. Holding Tarot Excalibur tightly, Ding Beichun nodded. Absolutely. It is possible to repair such a real sword. For me, it is also another perception of the sword. The little emperor nodded. Then I will leave it to you. If the repair is not good, I will ask you. Chapter 47-47. Ding Beichun grinned. His eyes did not leave the Tai Luo Excalibur. Rest assured, there is no real sword that Ding Beichun can't handle in the world. After all, being able to use such a real sword, I am afraid that the Sword Brothers have already realized their swordsmanship. Zai Audiobook smiled, then raised his eyebrows. Beichun, if I say his swordsmanship, his future will not be under your master. Do you believe it? Ding Beichun raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang with full of disbelief. Beyond my master? Don't laugh, Brother Yan. I haven't seen anyone who can surpass my master in kendo so far. Then you haven't seen it now, Xiao Dijuan said. Ding Beichun's eyes became more and more bright. Brother Jian, are you a sword fairy? Jian Wushuang heard the words, shook his head and smiled bitterly. Jian Xian can't talk, at most it has his own perception of kendo. That's great. I followed the master to practice kendo before I started to build the sword. Ding Beichun said excitedly. Brother sword. Otherwise we will discuss how. I haven't been in a long time. I have studied with others. Nonsense, we are here. Xiao Emperor was stopped by Jian Wushuang before he could finish. He said, we just don't have much to do. Brother Beichun and I have a discussion here. It's not bad. I'm going to prepare. Ding Beichun said this. Hurriedly swept towards the tens of thousands of feet of furnace tripod, manipulating the giant force to turn the Ding Gai. Ding Beichun threw the Tai Luo Excalibur in a hurry, and then quickly returned to the two. I said, you just threw the sword in, is it okay? Xiao Dijuan wondered. Relax, if you want to recast the sword, the first step is to smelt the embryo. I have my own measure. Ding Beichun can't wait any longer. Brother Jian, let's start? Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile, and withdrawing a little step was 100 feet away. Ding Beichun didn't talk much anymore, and with one hand directly, a real sword broke through the sky and fell into his palm. Holding the real sword, his whole person's breath is condensed, as if the sword is out of the box. The iron filings fell off, slowly revealing a heroic cheek, and the elaborate upper body seemed to have kendo flowing, and the flowing clouds and water lines were flowing. Jian Wushuang breathed his breath, and the invisible long sword condensed out of Wushuang kendo appeared in his hands. Seeing this scene, Ding Beichun's eyes were brighter, and he was able to consolidate the swordsmanship. Even if he watched countless swords, he had only seen them a few times. And to be able to achieve this point, it is all sword repairing power. The little emperor looked at the scene of the killing, and retreated helplessly. No one can dissuade the relatives of Jianqi. At the next moment, Ding Beichun took the lead and swept with a vast sword. But for a moment, the two swords were opposed, and the blades collided. Zheng, zheng, zheng. It seems that a sword collision, but it has already been tens of thousands of moves. Feng Rui's long sword opened and closed, and Ding Beichun at the moment seemed to be immersed in the cast sword, and the fancy sword and the sword were quickly cut off. For any Yinxian game, I am afraid that the body has disappeared under this blow. Rao Shijian Wushuang felt great pressure. This guy was not only able to beat the hammer, but also the sword. Although Jian Wushuang didn't retreat under this wide-open slash, the ground beneath his feet had cracked a deep gully. However, in the next match, Ding Beichun's real sword was already unable to adapt to such a high-intensity confrontation. and was directly cut into two segments by Jian Wushuang. Happy, Ding Beichun, who was forced to retreat by a sword, laughed, and after throwing away the broken sword, he picked up a real sword from the sky. Brother Jian, the next thing is my sword intention, he said with a deep voice. The flowing clouds and water on his body began to surge. It seemed that the strength within the entire abyss of heaven was awakened by him, carrying a large amount of magenta magma, and a treasure image was materialized behind him. An indescribable heavy pressure came, and Jian Wushuang retreated half a step with his right foot, with an invisible long sword in front of him. Facing the vast treasure in front of him, he was extremely calm, as if he had been used to it. After condensing this sword and treasure image, Ding Beichun directly held up the real sword in his hand and slashed it towards Jian Wushuang. Boom! The space is tearing, purple magma is galloping, and the sword is not a long sword but a blunt object. Just like the blunt object of the mighty giant hammer, it fell down heavily, and Jian Wushuang also aroused a style of Star River, Lake and Sea sword intention at this moment. Star-style swordsmanship came out, and a pair of unparalleled treasures of the same size came, and their palms were tenaciously attacked. Seeing this scene, the little emperor flew directly at the next moment. Boom! The unprecedented martyrdom exploded, and the two treasures were wiped out together, triggering a natural turmoil, and the endless gang wind ripped open space. Almost at the same time when the two treasures collided, a black ranger broke open and died, resolutely slashing to Ding Beichun. Zheng! Ding Beichun hurriedly raised his sword to resist, never thinking that the real sword in his hand was actually directly cut into two sections. A sword tip that seemed to be condensed by the flowing cloud, then touched his neck. It's really too fast, from the first confrontation to the first collision of kendo, but it's only a breath of time. But it was during this time of interest that this situation was formed. The sword that Wu Wushuang touched on his neck, even if he could not be headed directly, could definitely be hit hard. This level of collision, once hit hard, will only end in 10 lives. It's just that Ding Beichun couldn't believe it, and he was defeated like this. He suffocated a bit, and obviously used the first type of swordsmanship, which became the situation now. Jian Wushuang also left a deep impression on him. The shot was fierce, and he was a strong opponent. Seemingly seeing the sullenness in Ding Beichun's eyes, Jian Wushuang smiled. And you read the book www.akanshu.com, carrying the long sword back to Bai Zhangguan. Come again. Ding Beichun's eyes lit up. Although he already knew the difference between him and Jian Wushuang, he did not want to give up this opportunity, and chose to fight again. This time, he no longer picked up the real sword on the sky dome, but like Jian Wushuang, slowly formed an invisible long sword. This is condensed by his own sense of swordsmanship, and is the sword blade that best fits his own. But because there is no figurative blade, the power displayed is extremely unstable. For example, Ding Beichun at the moment, although the invisible long sword is also condensed, but the sword meaning is very volatile, and it seems that it can disperse at any time. The invisible long sword of Wushuang's sword has never been said to be unstable. This is the desperate sword meaning that he realized in the sad land, which has already been tempered to the top. Chapter 47-48. Jiani Kendo has become a mountain and sea, and it has nothing to do with it. Even if you don't need the sword to condense the blade, just use a branch or grass. The sword Wushuang is confident that he can play the sword power of Wushuang Kendo. Earlier in the Heavenly Palace of Divine Power Universe, he discussed the sword with the sword fairy Ding Bai for more than 10,000 years, using a peach blossom branch. The invisible long sword condensed out, and the breath of Ding Beichun's whole body was as if it were a sword. Wisps of invisible swords escaped from each of his pores, and his fine upper body, flowing clouds and water patterns began to fluctuate, like the rise of the rivers and seas. A sword pointed before, and about 10,000 waves of water waves attached to the blade, as if the dragon was ready to attack. My sword is called the Seven Swords of Beichun. Although it has the name of the Seven Swords, It is only 3 swords, and the remaining 4 swords, I am afraid it is difficult to complete. Ding Beichun said slowly. However, my only 3 swords have forced 6,000 to retreat into Yinding cultivation, and I haven't lost it yet. Please take a look today. Jian Wushuang heard the words, point to stop. There was a ripple in the air quietly. Ding Beichun condensed on the spot, but his breath suddenly fell with the invisible sword in his hand. It was only then that Jian Wushuang discovered that the dense flowing clouds and water patterns on Ding Beichun's body were not a certain pattern, but a sword-like sword prop. Each flowing cloud and water pattern is a sword meaning. At this moment, almost half of the entire abyss of the sky is covered by Ding Beichun's sword way. Just like a million swords, the unprecedented pressure made Sword Wushuang all dignified. A star-shaped sword in the previous note forced Ding Beichun to retreat. The sword meaning of the river word also followed, and the more powerful and majestic sword meaning became the surging Tianhe, which emerged from the sleeve of Jian Wushuang. Regarding Wushuang Kendo, the first 2 styles of Xinghe Lake sword intentions, nowadays Jian Wushuang, becomes more and more clear to the heart. The 2 sword meanings of the star character and the river character not only complement each other, but also have their own unique sword potential. These 2 types of swordsmanship serve as the framework and cornerstone of the entire unparalleled swordsmanship, so that there is no mutual crushing situation between them. They are both imposing and powerful, and have an endless potential of swordsmanship. Perhaps only the latter 2 forms, lake and sea, will have more terrifying and amazing performances. The so-called kendo, sword technique, sword intention, even if the packaging is more gorgeous, in the final analysis, it is nothing more than a killing skill. Only the more powerful and prodigal is the ultimate goal. This time, Jian Wushuang took the lead. A sword pushed millions, and the river of sword waterfalls rushed to Ding Beichun. Jian Wushuang no longer sat on the long river, but stood on the spot, raised his hands to condense an invisible sword, buried in the long river of the sword waterfall, and headed forward. At the moment, Ding Beichun's eyes are full of fanaticism. The sword patterns on his body are all engraved by the master's hand, and he can retreat 6,000 tops with one blow. If his sword is defeated, does it mean that the young man in front of him really has the power to fight against master? Xianhe's dazzling flowing clouds and water ripples, like hundreds of dragons, coiled around each other. The 2 kendos, which belonged to the same extreme, collided. The little emperor who watched from afar, his eyes were horrified again, and he almost retreated from the abyss of this rift with almost no thought. Bum! Boom! The shocking blow shattered everything he could see. The sea of magenta magma leaped, rising 1,000 feet high, and swallowed this last piece of land frantically. At the same time, the whole black stone giant hall began to collapse, and Wanjian, which was suspended above the sky dome, trembled in unison, and then broke together. Such a devastating engagement struck the entire Giantianxiandi, and at the same time, the invisible aftermath spread across most of the heavens. The thousands of fairies who were still grooming in the sea of flowers were the first to feel this aftermath of the shock, and all looked at Jiantian in amazement. Sister, isn't there a place strictly prohibited by the emperor? How could such a loud noise occur? Fairy Huangshan said nervously. Will you go to the emperor? Fairy Baishan heard the words and stretched out her thin hand to make a mute. If we shouldn't ask, we don't care. There will be someone in heaven's court to examine it. The rest of the fairies heard the words, and continued to freshen up without speaking. Only a little hesitation flashed in the eyes of the fairy in the white shirt, who was able to enter the Jiantian at this moment, and had the authority to enter the Jiantian. Only the little emperor. But what purpose does he enter? Thinking of this, a stream of light transformed into Yanli spread out of her hands, and quickly flew into the clouds and disappeared. At the same time, Yu Bo, sitting in the listening wind, suddenly opened his eyes and disappeared in the next moment. More than half of the black stone giant temple was damaged, and even the ground was open for nearly 10,000 miles. The purple magma seemed to boil the sky dome, and under the ground like ruins, 3 bodies are standing on the magma. Among them Ding Beichun, who was naked with a naked upper body, gasped heavily. Although Jian Wushuang looked indifferent, the palm of the bleeding bead seemed to indicate that he was not easy to win. In the previous confrontation, although Jian Wushuang added a unique sword to the river-style sword intention, it was almost defeated. He did not expect that Ding Bichen's kendo actually concealed the three sword intentions, combining the three into one as a sword. It must be said that this Ding Bichen's swordsmanship is extremely strong, with an imposing momentum, faintly making Jian Wushuang feel that it is similar to Ding Baiyi's unique sword. But even so, Jian Wushuang still won. He won't win the realm, not behind Yin Li, purely the victory of kendo competition. After recovering his breath, Ding Beichun arched his hand at Jian Wushuang. Brother Jian, I lost. Continue to practice diligently. When your swordsmanship is perfect, come to me to testify. Jian Wushuang reported with a smile. Ding Beichun heard and said with a smile, if I really have the day when kendo is in harmony, I will definitely prove to the brother Jian. The little emperor came to the two with a slight doubt. After all, did you smell anything? Ding Beichun froze. You reading www.akanshu.com immediately turned his head and slowly looked at the vast furnace that had been swallowed by magma. My stove. The wind was rushing, and his figure rose to the storm. He jumped directly into the magma and dragged the huge furnace tripod up. But everything was too late, and the glory in the furnace was no longer gloomy. Ding Beichun shook his hands and slowly opened the furnace tripod. On arrival, countless choking black smoke burst out. Brother Jian, your sword seems to have been destroyed. He cried with a sad face, and reached out to take out an unrecognizable sword embryo from the furnace. Jian Wushuang. Little Emperor, Beichun, think about how to get beaten. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.